I never thought something like this could happen to me, but here I am, telling the world about the betrayal that still stings like it was yesterday. My name's Alex. I'm 26, and if you asked anyone in my life, I was always the one to go above and beyond for the people I cared about. I've always been the kind of person who thrives on helping others, especially my best friend, Ryan. We'd known each other since high school, bonded over our shared interests in tech, video games, and pretty much anything that involved deep diving into nerdy stuff. Our friendship was like a well-oiled machine. We got each other, always had each other's backs. I thought the world of him, and I never imagined he'd do something that would make me question everything. It all started a couple of years ago when Ryan and I were working on this tech project together. We were both trying to create a new app, something simple, but with potential. It wasn't anything groundbreaking, but we thought it could make a difference in the way people track their daily habits. I did all the legwork. I coded the majority of the app, designed the UI, and even put together the first working prototype. Ryan, well, he was good at brainstorming ideas, but he wasn't nearly as skilled at the technical side of things. And that's where I came in. I wasn't bothered by it. I liked working on the technical stuff, and I liked that we were partners. Or at least, that's what I thought. We spent months on the project. I had late nights, long weekends, and a few moments where I could have just thrown in the towel, but I didn't. Ryan kept telling me that the app had great potential, that it could be huge. So I kept going. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. In the back of my mind, though, something was starting to feel off. Ryan would be there, giving suggestions, sure, but he never really offered to help with any of the actual work. He'd be the one saying, "Oh, I've got this great idea for the app." But when it came time to do the nitty-gritty coding or testing, I'd be the one doing it all. I tried to push my feelings aside. I didn't want to overthink it. We were friends, right? So what if I was doing all the hard work? I didn't need the praise or recognition, just the satisfaction of getting the job done. At least, that's what I told myself. But then the project began to take off. We started getting attention from some investors, and Ryan's attitude started to shift. He went from we to I whenever he talked about the app. "I think this feature could work well," he'd say. "I'm going to pitch this to some investors." I started to notice he was taking all the credit. In meetings with potential backers, he would talk about how his vision was coming together, how he was spearheading the project. And every time I said something about my contributions, he'd quickly brush me off, making me feel like I was just some minor player in the background. I tried to talk to him about it, but every time, he'd assure me it was just a phase. He'd tell me, "Don't worry, you're still a part of this. It's just that now we need to focus on getting more attention. This is the next step." But I knew the truth. I could feel it in the way he'd talk to people, in the way he handled everything like he was the one doing all the heavy lifting. I even caught him telling a few people that he was the mastermind behind the app. But I just kept quiet, biting my tongue, hoping it would pass. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe it wasn't as bad as I thought. The final straw came when we were in a meeting with a major investor. The kind of investor that could take our app from a small side project to a real business. Ryan had told me he wanted me to be there to pitch the app with him. I was excited. Finally, all that hard work, all those sleepless nights, would be recognized. We were in a conference room, the investor sitting across from us, and Ryan was going on and on about the vision for the app. But when the investor turned to me and asked, "So, what part did you play in the development?" Ryan quickly jumped in and said, "Oh, Alex was just helping with the tech side. But the real work was all me, bringing the vision together." I froze. I stared at him, my heart racing, my mind spinning. He had taken everything, every single thing I had done, and made it his own. I could feel the anger building up inside me, but I kept my face neutral. The investor seemed to buy it. The deal was made, and Ryan and I walked out of the meeting room together. When we got to the parking lot, I couldn't hold it in any longer. "Ryan, what was that?" I asked, my voice shaking with frustration. He looked at me like I was crazy. "What do you mean? I'm just trying to get us the deal. Don't you get it? This is how the game works." "No, it's not." I almost shouted. "You took all the credit for my work. You've been doing it for months now. I've been busting my ass on this app, and you've just been sitting back, letting me do all the work while you take all the glory." He sighed, rolling his eyes like I was overreacting. "Alex, stop. You're being dramatic. It's business. Don't you understand? We needed this deal. It's just how it is." I was speechless. I stood there for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. And then, without saying another word, I got into my car and drove off. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't even care. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could think about was how Ryan had stolen everything I had worked for. How he had turned something we built together into something he could profit off of while I was left in the dust. And the worst part? He still didn't get it. He still didn't see how much he had taken from me. But I wasn't going to let it go. Not this time. The next day, he called me, asking me to help him with something on the app. Something that would require a lot of my expertise. He didn't ask if I was available. He didn't apologize. He didn't even acknowledge how he'd treated me. It was just, hey, can you help with this? I need you to do this thing for me. And that's when I decided enough was enough. I was done being the nice guy. Done being the one who always helped him, no matter how much he took me for granted. I wasn't going to be his doormat anymore. So I said it. No, he paused, obviously surprised. What? Come on, Alex. I need you. I know you need me. But I don't need to help you anymore. Not after everything you've done. There was silence on the other end of the line. Then, he tried to play it off. You're being ridiculous. This is just a small setback. You're still a part of the team. But I wasn't buying it. And I wasn't going to be there to fix everything for him anymore. I hung up the phone, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But that was just the beginning. Ryan was about to find out just how far I was willing to go. The silence after I hung up the phone felt like the calm before a storm. I could already sense the wheels turning in Ryan's mind. He was used to having me around, fixing his messes, picking up his slack. But not this time. I wasn't going to play along anymore. I didn't know how he'd react, but I was done being the nice guy who just takes it. The thing is, though, I didn't fully understand just how far Ryan would go to make sure I didn't walk away from him. And I was about to find out. The first couple of days after I told him no were almost eerily quiet. He didn't call me, didn't text. I thought maybe he'd gotten the hint, that maybe he was giving me some space to cool off. But deep down, I knew Ryan. I knew he wouldn't let something like this slide without trying to fix it on his terms. Sure enough, by the third day, he called again. This time, though, it wasn't a casual request for help with the app. No, this time it was different. I let the phone ring for a few seconds before I picked it up. Hello, Alex, he said, his voice a little too calm, almost eerie. We need to talk. I could hear the arrogance in his tone, like he thought everything would just go back to normal. What about? I asked, trying to keep my cool. About the project. And about you pulling away. You're being unreasonable, Alex. You know that, right? The audacity. I could feel my blood starting to boil again. Unreasonable? You're the one who took all the credit for my work, Ryan. You're the one who made it all about you. He sighed like I was making a bigger deal out of nothing. Alex, stop. This isn't the time to throw a tantrum. The deal is in motion now, and if we want to make this work, we have to stick together. You know that. So, stop being so stubborn and come back to the project. I wanted to laugh. I really did. The nerve of him to act like nothing had happened. I'm not coming back, Ryan. Not like this. Look, he said, suddenly sounding more desperate. I get it. I do. But we're partners in this, and I need you. I don't know what's gotten into you, but we can still make this work. You know I've got your back. I didn't respond immediately. I was trying to stay calm, but it was hard. Every word he said felt like a slap in the face, like he thought I could just forget everything. No, Ryan, I said, finally my voice firm. You don't have my back. You never did. You only care about getting ahead. There was a long pause, and I could almost hear the wheels in his head turning, trying to find a way to twist my words. Fine. You want to walk away? Then walk away. But don't expect me to clean up your mess when it all falls apart. That was the breaking point. The way he said it so coldly, so dismissively, made me realize just how far gone our friendship had become. I wasn't just his partner anymore. I was a tool, a stepping stone to get him where he wanted to go. And it was at that moment that I decided I wasn't going to let him get away with it. Not anymore. I didn't respond. I just hung up. I knew what I had to do next. Over the next few days, I started making plans. Ryan might have thought he could just push me around, but I wasn't going to let him. I wasn't going to sit back and let him walk all over me any longer. So, I started digging into the app's code, into all the stuff he didn't know about, the stuff he never bothered to learn because he was too busy making himself look good. I started pulling out the things that would make it all fall apart if he tried to move forward without me. Nothing malicious, just enough to make it clear that without me, his project would be nothing. I knew it was risky, but I didn't care. He'd taken everything from me, and now it was time to take back control. A week went by, and I could feel Ryan getting more anxious. Every time I saw him or talked to him, he seemed more desperate. He'd call, text, and email. Nothing was enough to get me to respond. But one afternoon, he showed up at my apartment unannounced. I wasn't expecting it, but I knew it was coming. I opened the door, and there he was, standing in the hallway with that look on his face. The same look he had when we were kids, trying to talk his way out of trouble. "Alex, come on. We need to talk." I didn't let him in. "What's there to talk about, Ryan? I know you're mad. I get it. But we're friends. This project is everything to both of us. You can't just walk away." I crossed my arms, trying to keep my voice steady. "You don't get it. This was never about the project, Ryan. It was about respect. You took everything I worked for, and you acted like I was just a tool for you to use. I'm not doing this anymore." He stepped forward, his face tightening in frustration. "You're throwing away everything we built. Everything we've worked for. Everything you built." I corrected him. "You didn't do this with me, Ryan. You did it without me." He stared at me, his expression darkening. "You'll regret this, you know. You're making a huge mistake." I stood my ground, not backing down. "Maybe, but it's not your mistake to make anymore." The silence between us hung heavy, and for a brief moment, I saw the desperation in his eyes, the same desperation I'd been feeling all along. But now it was his turn to feel it. And just when I thought it was over, Ryan did something that made my blood run cold. He pulled out his phone and showed me a message, one that had been sent to our investor. A message that made my stomach drop. Ryan had convinced the investor to cut me out completely, offering me a pittance to walk away and giving him full control of the project. "You're not going to get away with this," I said, my voice trembling with anger. I wasn't just hurt. I was furious. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was personal. He'd crossed a line. But Ryan just smiled. "It's already done, Alex. There's nothing you can do now." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, but deep down, I knew he was wrong. I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. I was about to show him just how wrong he was. Ryan's smug grin was enough to make me angry. He thought he had me cornered, like he'd won the game, and I was just some pawn he could discard. But in that moment, something clicked inside me. It wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about taking back what was mine, about reclaiming my hard work and dignity. I had been his safety net for so long, always cleaning up his messes, always covering for him. But now? Now, I was done. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. "You think you've won?" I asked, my voice colder than I felt. Ryan's grin widened. "I don't just think it, I know it. You're out, Alex. This is over." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Instead, I reached over, grabbed my phone, and pulled up the email chain between me and the investor. It was a lengthy conversation, long enough to show that Ryan had been manipulating things from the start, feeding the investor lies about my involvement in the project, exaggerating my contributions to make it look like I was a liability. It wasn't just about me being cut out. It was about him painting me as someone who wasn't worth investing in. I knew what I had to do. I turned the phone screen toward him, showing him the message thread. "You want to talk about being cut out?" I said, the anger rising in my chest again. "You've been feeding the investor lies about me, Ryan, and that's something I'm not going to let slide." He looked at the screen, his face draining of color as he scanned the messages. There was no hiding it. His manipulations were right there in black and white. I could feel the shift in the air, the tension between us growing thicker. He wasn't so confident anymore. "What do you think you're going to do with that?" He sneered, but I could tell he was rattled. "I'm going to the investor," I said, locking eyes with him. "I'm going to make sure he knows the truth. And this whole project? It's over for you if I do that." Ryan's face twisted in anger, but now I could see the desperation. He didn't want the world to know what he had done. He didn't want anyone to see the truth, the ugly reality of his selfishness. "You wouldn't do that," he growled. "You're bluffing." I stood my ground, my fingers hovering over the email app, "Try me. Do you really want to risk everything for this?" "I have all the proof I need." He opened his mouth, then closed it, his mind clearly working overtime to find a way out. For the first time in a long while, Ryan seemed to be the one cornered. He had always been the manipulative one, the one in control, but now the tables had turned. "You think you've got me, don't you?" he said, trying to regain his composure. But I could see the cracks in his facade. He wasn't nearly as sure of himself anymore. "I don't need to think," I said, standing taller. "I know I've got you." and I'm not going to let you keep getting away with it." For a moment, there was silence. Ryan's face twitched, his mind clearly calculating his next move. He could see that this was his last chance to fix things, but there was no easy out anymore. The leverage was in my hands, and I wasn't going to just let him walk away from this, like he always had before. "Look, Alex," he said after a long pause, his voice lowering, almost pleading. "I made a mistake. Okay, I get it. But you've got to understand, I was just trying to make things happen. I thought I could make it all work without you, but I was wrong. I need you. We can fix this, right? I'll make it up to you. Just please don't go to the investor." I crossed my arms, a bitter taste in my mouth. "You think I'm going to just forgive you after everything? After all the lies, the manipulation, the stealing of my ideas?" He started, but I cut him off. "You used me, Ryan," I said, the words tumbling out faster now. "You used me for my skills, for my work, and when it was convenient for you, you threw me aside. And now you want me to just help you out of the mess you created? No, that's not how this works." He didn't respond immediately. His shoulders slumped, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes that wasn't entitlement. Regret, maybe, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. "Ryan, I'm not helping you. I'm done being your safety net. I'm done pretending like this is just a simple misunderstanding. This is about respect, and you lost that a long time ago." He opened his mouth to argue again, but I wasn't interested in listening to excuses. "You've got two choices," I said, the words hanging heavy in the air. "You can keep pretending you're in control, or you can admit that you messed up and face the consequences." His face twisted with frustration. "You don't understand, Alex. This isn't just about the project. It's about everything we've worked for. I've given so much. You've given nothing," I interrupted, my voice low and firm. "You've taken everything from me, and now you expect me to bail you out? No, this is on you." Ryan stood there for a moment, looking defeated. His eyes flickered down to the phone in my hand, and then back to me. I could feel the weight of his stare, like he was trying to figure out if he could somehow worm his way out of this. But there was no coming back from this. Not this time. He exhaled sharply and finally said the words I'd been waiting for. "Fine. Do it. Send the email. But know this. You're ruining everything. You're ruining everything we had." I shook my head. "You ruined that long before I walked away." And with that, I hit send. The email went off, the message already drafted, and the finality of it hit me like a punch to the gut. But it felt good too. It felt like I was finally taking back control. Ryan could say what he wanted, but I knew this was the only way to fix it. I wasn't going to let him get away with it anymore. The moment I hit send, I stood there in silence, waiting for his next move. Ryan had always been good at finding a way to manipulate things, but this time, he didn't have the upper hand. I was done being his backup. I was done being his fall guy. Ryan just stared at me for a long moment, and then he turned and walked out of the apartment without another word. And just like that, everything changed. The conflict wasn't over yet, though. Ryan wasn't going to take this lying down. I knew that. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had the upper hand. I didn't know how this was going to end, but one thing was clear: this was far from over. The days that followed were a whirlwind of tension. I barely slept, consumed with the weight of what had happened. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts from Ryan, begging for a chance to talk, to fix things, but I ignored them all. He had pushed me too far, and now there was no going back. It wasn't just the business with the investor, it was everything that had built up over the years. The countless times he'd used me, taken advantage of my skills, and expected me to clean up his messes without so much as a thank you. I had spent too long being the one who always had to pick up the pieces, and I was tired of it. This time, I was standing up for myself. A week later, I got a call from the investor. His voice was calm, but I could tell there was a trace of disappointment in it. "Alex," he said, "I've been reviewing everything, and I have to admit, I'm concerned. Ryan's behavior, his lack of transparency. It's not what we agreed upon." My heart dropped as I listened. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. Ryan had been exposed, and the consequences were finally catching up to him. But instead of feeling vindicated, I felt empty. It was like I had won a battle, but the war had taken so much from me that the victory didn't feel as sweet as I had imagined. After a long conversation with the investor, we agreed that the project would move forward without Ryan. He was out, officially. The terms had been rewritten, and I was given control of the work I had poured my soul into. I was finally free from his grasp. But even as I stood on the precipice of this new opportunity, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. A few days later, I ran into Ryan. It was an awkward encounter at a coffee shop. He looked different, more defeated than I had ever seen him. His usual cocky attitude was gone, replaced by a sense of vulnerability I hadn't expected. For a moment, I almost felt pity for him. Almost. He didn't say anything at first, just stared at me with a mixture of anger and regret. Finally, he sighed, slumping into a chair across from me. "You know, I never thought it would come to this," he said quietly. "I never thought you'd actually send that email. I thought you'd always just let it slide like you always did before." I stayed silent, not sure what to say. It wasn't like I wanted him to be miserable. I just wanted him to understand what he had done, to realize that actions have consequences and that taking people for granted has a price. "I was stupid," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "I should have never used you. You were the one person who always had my back, and I messed that up. I don't know how to fix it." His words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, I thought about forgiving him. It would have been easy to just brush everything aside and go back to the way things were. But deep down, I knew I couldn't. I had finally found the strength to let go, to stop being the person who always picked up the pieces for everyone else. I had to move forward, even if that meant leaving him behind. "Ryan," I said, my voice firm but not unkind, "I can't fix this. Not anymore. You had your chances, and you chose to take advantage of me every time. I've given enough. It's your turn to figure things out on your own." He stared at me for a long time, his face a mix of frustration and resignation. He didn't say anything else. He just stood up and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving me with a strange sense of finality. It wasn't easy. Letting go of someone who had once been so important to me, someone who had been my closest friend, my partner in everything, was hard. But it was also necessary. I couldn't keep letting him drag me down. I had to stand on my own, to build my own future without him. As the weeks passed, I focused on moving forward. The project took off, and despite the rocky start, I found myself in a place I had never imagined I'd be on my own, but stronger than ever. The investor was happy with the progress, and I was finally getting the recognition I deserved. It felt good. It felt right. Ryan, on the other hand, seemed to disappear from the scene entirely. I heard through mutual friends that he was struggling, trying to rebuild his reputation, but the damage had been done. He had lost everything: his partnership with the investor, his connection with me, and the trust of everyone who had once believed in him. The final piece of the puzzle came when I received an email from him one day. It was short, simple. "I messed up. I get it now. I'm sorry." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The apology, though long overdue, came too late. I had moved on. I sat back in my chair, staring at the message, realizing that in letting go of Ryan, I had gained so much more than I had lost. The power to stand up for myself, the strength to walk away, and the freedom to build a life on my own terms. And that was all I needed. Some people are born into families that lift each other up, others into ones that clip your wings the moment you show signs of flying. My name's Blake. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 12 years, I've run a small but successful auto repair garage just outside of town. It's not glamorous. I smell like engine oil more days than not, and half my wardrobe consists of branded work shirts with grease stains that never quite wash out. But I built that garage from the ground up, signed my first lease with shaking hands and a used wrench set, and now I employ 4 other mechanics, all of whom rely on me to keep their own families fed. So no, it's not glamorous, but it's mine. Growing up, though, you'd think I was the family embarrassment. I'm the youngest of 3 boys. My oldest brother, Greg, is 39, the golden child, the startup whiz, the one who left our small town for bigger things in the city, and who made sure everyone knew just how much bigger those things were. My parents? They bought into the hype like it was gospel. Greg could do no wrong. When he got his MBA, there was a catered party at the house with engraved napkins and a "Drinks on Greg" signature cocktail. When I passed my ASE certification, my dad gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "Well, at least you've got a trade." The middle brother, Josh, is 36. He's quieter, works in logistics, married, 2 kids, lives about 45 minutes away. We're not especially close, but he's not cruel, just passive. The kind of guy who fades into the wallpaper during family events and laughs nervously when Greg makes one of his usual snide remarks. Greg's been like that forever, by the way. That smug, upper hand tone. He once brought his girlfriend, now wife, Celeste, to Thanksgiving and introduced her to my then-girlfriend Sarah by saying, "This is Blake's girl. He fixes cars for a living. If you ever need an oil change or a discount on tires, he's your guy." I could practically see Sarah's face drop. He made it sound like I was a punchline. I pulled him aside afterward and told him to cut it out, but he just laughed, said I was too sensitive, and that I should be proud of being a blue-collar hero. It only got worse after I married Sarah. We had a small wedding. Nothing fancy, just a backyard ceremony with close friends, folding chairs, barbecue, and a rented tent. It was meaningful to us. Honest. Every detail was chosen with care, and we didn't go into debt for it, which felt like a win. Greg? He showed up late, wearing sunglasses, and loudly asked someone, "Is this the rehearsal or the actual wedding?" Then laughed. At the reception, he made a toast, uninvited, and joked that Sarah must really love me if she was willing to marry a guy whose idea of fine dining was a gas station burrito. That one stuck with me, not just because it was cruel, but because he said it in front of everyone, my coworkers, her parents, my friends. I remember standing there, arm around my new bride, forcing a laugh so I wouldn't make a scene on our big day. But inside, I was boiling. Not because I was ashamed of my job. I'm proud of what I do, but because he never saw the person I'd become. Just the version of me that didn't fit into his neatly curated image of success. After that, I started pulling away. I didn't go to every birthday dinner. Skipped a few holiday gatherings. My parents noticed, but they chalked it up to my busy schedule. They never asked why I seemed distant. Maybe they didn't want to know. Or maybe they knew and just didn't care to fix it. Things simmered quietly for a few years. I kept my head down, expanded the garage, hired more help. Sarah and I bought a modest house, adopted a rescue dog named Wrench. I know, and we were content. Not flashy, not rich, but content. Then came Greg's startup, Mavra, some kind of tech platform for remote team-building exercises. Don't ask me how that works. I'm not his target audience, and I stopped pretending to understand his innovations a long time ago. He raised capital from a few angel investors, got some media buzz, even did a podcast. My parents were over the moon. Every call with my mom included some variation of, "Your brother was just featured in that entrepreneurship magazine," or "He's going to be presenting at a conference in New York." Meanwhile, I was getting brake fluid on my jeans and making sure an elderly woman's AC worked in her 2009 Corolla during a heat wave. Again, no shame in it. But the contrast? It was always thrown in my face. Then, 2 months ago, Mavra crashed. Hard. Apparently, the market shifted, funding dried up, one of the big backers pulled out, and Greg, Mr. Visionary, had put more of his own money into it than he let on. A lot more. Suddenly, he was facing bankruptcy. Celeste left him temporarily to stay with her sister for space. And Greg, well, he spiraled. And that's when the phone call started. Not from Greg. From my parents. It started subtly. My dad called one afternoon while I was at work and asked if business was still good. I said yeah, we were steady, booked a week in advance, even looking at expanding the back half of the shop into a second bay. He made a weird humming sound and said, "Glad to hear. It's important to have assets during tough times." Didn't think much of it. Until my mom called 2 days later and mentioned, almost in passing, that Greg was going through a rough patch and could really use a strong support system. She asked if I'd thought about investing in anything lately. I said no. I was saving for a new lift for the garage. She sighed like I'd just said I was buying scratch-offs with my life savings. Then Josh texted me. Just a simple, "You should call Greg. He's not doing great." I asked if he was okay. Josh said, "Not really. Mom and Dad are worried." But again, no direct ask. Just vibes. Guilt. Then Greg himself finally called. The voicemail was classic him. "Blake, it's me. I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but I could really use your help. Call me back." I didn't. Instead, I had dinner with Sarah that night and told her everything. She didn't say much at first, just listened, nodding slowly as she ate. Then she put her fork down and said, "You know what's coming, right?" I did. I just didn't want to admit it. The next Sunday, we went to my parents for dinner. Big mistake. The moment we walked in, my mom kissed my cheek like nothing was wrong, then said, "I'm so glad you're here. We've all been talking, and there's something important we need to discuss." The table was already set. Greg was there, pale, thinner, looking more tired than I'd ever seen him. He tried to smile when he saw me, but it didn't reach his eyes. Josh and his wife were already seated, looking anywhere but at me. I hadn't even taken my jacket off before my dad clapped his hands and said, "All right, let's get to it." And what he said next, that was the moment everything changed. I should have turned around and walked out right then, but I didn't. I stood there, coat half on, half off, watching my family's carefully rehearsed performance unfold like they were about to stage a heartwarming intervention. Except it wasn't about helping someone through rehab or saving a marriage. No, this was about me giving up everything I'd built to rescue the golden boy from the consequences of his own ambition. "We've been thinking," my dad began, looking me dead in the eye, "that this is a real opportunity for the family to come together. Greg has always been the dreamer, the visionary. He's broke," Josh muttered, then winced, like he hadn't meant to say it out loud. My dad shot him a glare. "He's not broke. He's just in a temporary situation. A setback. Great men face setbacks." Sarah reached over and gently touched my wrist under the table. A silent signal. I didn't say anything. Not yet. Mom smiled tightly and added, "Your brother has a plan. A good one. He just needs a little time and a little help." We all agreed that it makes the most sense for the family to invest in him again. "And since you've got the garage," there it was. The line. The one they'd been building up to all week. I felt it drop like a cinder block in my stomach. "What about the garage?" I asked, though I already knew. Greg leaned forward then, like he couldn't help himself anymore. "You've got equity. Real property. Equipment. You could sell off some of it, maybe refinance the land, float a bridge loan for 6 to 12 months. I could get Mavra back on its feet. The investors would come back if they saw a bit of cash flow. This isn't charity, Blake. It's strategic." He actually used that word. Strategic. I blinked. "You want me to sell part of my garage to fund the same startup that already tanked?" He didn't flinch. "You've always been the guy who works with his hands. I'm the one who works with ideas. You've got the physical capital, I've got the intellectual capital. Together." "Stop." I didn't mean to cut him off like that, but it just came out. "You're asking me to bail you out." "We're asking you to help your family," my mom corrected, like this was some kind of group hug moment. "Greg's your brother. And I'm your son." I shot back, more sharply than I intended. "Do you even hear yourselves right now?" Dad crossed his arms. "Don't get defensive, Blake. We're just trying to have a civil conversation." I stood there for a moment, just absorbing it all. The smell of roast chicken in the air. The fake cheer in my mom's voice. Greg sitting there, dressed in some designer casual thing with a watch that probably cost more than my welding rig. And somehow, I was the one expected to sacrifice everything. Josh finally spoke up again. "It's not right to put all of this on Blake. He's got a business to run. A family." Mom turned to him, exasperated. "You said you couldn't help because of the kids' school tuition, Josh. We understand. But Blake has always had more flexibility." "Flexibility?" I repeated, almost laughing. "You think owning and running a business is flexible? I work 6 days a week. I haven't taken a real vacation in 3 years. I'm on call for emergencies. My name is on every piece of paperwork. But because I don't wear a suit or pitch to VCs, you assume I have money just lying around." Greg shook his head. "This isn't about pride, Blake. It's about doing the right thing. You've got steady income. You're not at risk the way I am." "Exactly," I snapped. "You're the risk, not me. And you want me to gamble my entire livelihood because you took a chance and lost." He frowned. "I didn't lose. The market shifted." "No," I said coldly. "You lost. You bet big. You burned through investor money. And now you're here asking me to burn down the only thing I've built because you still think you're the smartest guy in the room." The room went silent. I could hear the fork Josh's wife dropped clink against her plate. My dad stood up. "Enough." But I wasn't done. "No, not enough," I said. "You want to talk about family? Let's talk about family. Where was Greg when I was fixing up the garage with secondhand tools and no AC in the middle of July? Where was he when I pulled a 72-hour shift during that storm because half the town's trucks broke down and people needed help? Where was any of you?" Sarah finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "Your family didn't even offer to help us with the wedding. But now you expect Blake to sell his business for Greg's company." My mom winced. "We thought you wanted a small wedding." "No," Sarah said, eyes steady. "We wanted a wedding we could afford. There's a difference." And when Greg made that toast. "Oh, come on," Greg groaned. "That was a joke. You're really still mad about that?" "Yes," I said, standing up. "Because you humiliated me in front of my wife's family. And you've never once apologized. Greg looked at our parents for backup. This is exactly the kind of chip-on-the-shoulder thinking that keeps him from growing. He's always been small-minded. And that was the breaking point. I saw red, not in the violent sense, but in that painful, boiling, clarity kind of way. My whole life, Greg had treated me like I was second tier. And my parents had let him. No, they'd encouraged it. They made excuses, smoothed it over, acted like it was my fault for not being more ambitious. I'm done, I said quietly. Mom blinked. What do you mean? I mean, I'm done pretending this is a family. You don't respect me. You don't respect what I do. And now, you expect me to sacrifice everything so Greg can try to play Silicon Valley again. Dad looked furious. You're being dramatic. No, I said. I'm being honest. And maybe for the first time in my life, I'm choosing myself. Greg stood up too. You're going to regret this, Blake. I'm telling you, this could have been a great opportunity for all of us. I don't need your opportunities, I said. I've already got something you'll never have. He narrowed his eyes. What? Stability, I said. And dignity. With that, I turned to Sarah. We're leaving. She stood without hesitation. We walked out together, coats barely on, leaving the smell of dinner and the echo of stunned silence behind us. As we got in the truck, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from release. Sarah looked over at me and whispered, You okay? I nodded. Yeah, for the first time in a long time. I think I am. But that wasn't the end. Not even close. Because the next morning, I woke up to 27 missed calls for voicemails and a text from Josh that simply said, You need to see this. And when I did, that was the moment it stopped being personal. That was the moment it became war. I'll never forget what it felt like that morning. Waking up in a daze, sunlight creeping through the curtains, the smell of fresh coffee wafting from the kitchen, and Sarah humming to herself like everything was normal. But my phone told a different story. 27 missed calls. For voicemails. And one text from Josh. You need to see this. My heart was already racing as I unlocked my phone. The first voicemail was from my mom, her voice cracking with forced calm. Blake, honey, I really think you're overreacting. We should talk. It's not fair to shut the whole family out over one dinner. Greg was just passionate. Call me, okay? The second was from Greg, and it made my skin crawl. Wow. Real mature move, Blake. Walk out like a drama queen and ignore the one time we actually needed you. But hey, maybe if your ego's more important than your family, you're not the man I thought you were. Third voicemail. Dad, Blake, we raised you better than this. I don't know what Sarah's feeding you, but you're throwing away decades of family loyalty over nothing. You better come around before it's too late. And the last one, that one was quiet. Just Greg again, muttering. You'll regret this. I swear you will. I was about to throw the phone across the room when Sarah stepped into the bedroom with 2 mugs in her hands. She caught the look on my face immediately. What happened? I showed her Josh's text. We opened it together. It was a screenshot. A Facebook post. From my mother. The caption read, Some people only show up when they need something, but disappear when we need them. Family is supposed to be forever. Greg is going through the worst moment of his life, and his own brother chose pride over love. Disappointed doesn't even begin to cover it. Underneath, dozens of comments. Family friends. Distant cousins. Church ladies who once brought us baked ziti after my granddad died. All of them weighing in, some tagging me. Praying for Greg. So sorry your other son turned his back on you. Blake was always a little distant, wasn't he? God sees who's loyal. I just sat there. Stunned. Heart pounding. Cheeks burning. Sarah scrolled through the comments. Jaw tightening with each swipe. They made it public, she whispered. They made you the villain. And they had. Suddenly, I wasn't just the black sheep. I was the selfish traitor who abandoned his family when they needed him most. My reputation? Trashed overnight. I got dirty looks at the grocery store. One of my longtime clients, a guy named Ron who brought his work van in every other month, called and canceled an appointment. Said he was rethinking who he did business with. It was like a slow bleed. Not dramatic, not explosive. Just cuts. Little ones, one after another. Until I started to feel it. The isolation. The doubt. The quiet, creeping voice that asked, what if they're right? I still showed up at the garage every day. Still opened at 7 a.m. Still worked through the oil changes and brake jobs and busted radiators. But it was different now. I was distracted. My hands shook sometimes. I snapped at my text more than I should have. A few customers ghosted me without a word. Then came the worst hit. My lease renewal. I'd rented the garage space from the same guy, Hank, for over a decade. Never missed a payment. We had a good relationship. Handshakes, not contracts. But when I reached out that month to renew, his tone had changed. I've had other offers, he said on the phone. Bigger ones. From a dealership group looking to expand. I felt my stomach drop. I've been here 12 years, Hank. I know, son. But times are changing. They're offering triple. I didn't blame him. Not really. It was business. But I hung up that day with the sickening realization that I might lose everything. The walls started closing in. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't focus. Sarah caught me just staring at the wall one night, my hands clenched in my lap like I was waiting for something to explode. "You can't let them win," she whispered. I looked at her, and something broke inside me. "They already have." But she shook her head. "No, not yet. You're still breathing. You're still you." I don't know what it was about the way she said it, like she was reminding me of something I'd forgotten. But that night, I opened my laptop and pulled up an old folder I hadn't touched in years. Business plans, sketches, photos of the shop from when I first started, notes I'd scribbled in the margins of receipts, dreaming about expanding. And buried deep inside, a list. If I ever own my building. Install second lift. Expand waiting area. Offer loyalty program. Add coffee station, Sarah's idea. Paint the garage doors red. It hit me like a punch to the chest. I'd been playing it safe for too long, and now I had nothing left to lose. That night marked the start of something new. Not a dramatic comeback montage, not a Rocky-style training sequence. Just quiet determination. I met with a real estate agent the next day. Told her I wanted to buy my own property. Something I could own, outright. Something no one could take from me. She blinked. "Industrial property's expensive right now." "I know," I said, "but I'm not looking for pretty. I'm looking for possible." It took weeks. I drove to the outskirts of town, scouted old lots, made calls, ran numbers. I almost gave up twice. But then I found it. An old muffler shop near the highway, half abandoned, with cracked windows and weeds poking through the asphalt. It was perfect. Ugly, forgotten, and full of potential. I scraped together every penny I had. Took out a small business loan. Liquidated my emergency fund. Sarah backed me every step of the way, even when it meant canceling a planned vacation and cutting back on every non-essential. We bought it. Blake's Garage 2.0. I didn't tell anyone, not even my techs at first. I spent nights and weekends fixing it up. Painted the walls myself. Sanded the floors. Hired a guy from church to rewire the lighting. Installed a second lift with help from my buddy Tom, who accepted pizza and beer as payment. It was slow. It was brutal. But it was mine. I moved operations over gradually, offered discounts to loyal customers to follow me, and started rebuilding my client base from the ground up. I even set up a little coffee corner in the waiting area, Sarah's touch, and a sign over the front door that read, "Built, not borrowed." And people noticed. Not just the quality of work, but the care, the pride, the story. Turns out, authenticity goes a long way. One customer left a glowing review on Yelp about how I personally stayed late to fix her car before a road trip. Another posted a picture of the shop's new sign, calling it a hidden gem with heart. Then the local paper did a feature on small business owners bouncing back after setbacks. And somehow, they found me. I told them the truth. No drama, no dirt. Just that I came from a family where success looked a certain way, and that I had to learn to define it for myself. The article went semi-viral in town. And just like that, the tide turned. People started showing up, not just for repairs, but to support someone they saw as real. Old friends reached out. Clients returned. Even Ron, the guy who bailed, called to apologize and asked if I'd look at his brakes. And through it all, I didn't hear a peep from my family. Until one day, 6 months later, I got a letter, handwritten, from Greg. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity got the better of me. The letter was short, just a page. But the final line stuck with me. "You might think I've lost everything. But the truth is, I never had what you built. I see that now. Greg." I didn't reply, not because I hated him, but because I was finally at peace. Finally free. But remember when I said that wasn't the end? Yeah, that's because the real payback was still coming. Because just when I thought I'd rebuilt my world quietly, privately, something happened. Something big. And this time, everyone would see it. By the time fall rolled around, the trees were changing colors, and so was everything else in my life. Business at the new garage was steady, more than steady, actually. I had to hire 2 more techs just to keep up with the flow. People liked the story. Like me, I guess. The article in the local paper had legs, and someone on Twitter reposted it with the caption, "Support your local mechanic. Blake's garage is the real deal." It exploded from there. A week later, a TikToker rolled through with a busted muffler, filmed the whole experience. Me personally walking him through the process, shaking his hand, handing his keys back with a smile. And by the next morning, I had over a dozen new appointments booked online. Our little booking software couldn't even keep up. But the biggest change? I stopped apologizing for who I was. I stopped dressing up for holidays just to look successful. I stopped saying just when I told people I was a mechanic. I stopped ducking family conversations out of guilt or obligation. Sarah called it my second engine. Like I'd rebuilt myself with new pistons, better fuel lines, and a turbo system running on peace of mind and spite. Spite, I've learned, is underrated. It was sometime in late October when I heard from Josh again. We hadn't spoken much since the dinner disaster. He'd sent a few texts here and there, updates on his kids, a thumbs-up emoji when the newspaper article went live, but he'd mostly kept out of the fray. That morning, he sent me a message that simply read, "You'll want to see this." Attached was a flyer. A digital one. Clean, modern font. Sleek branding. Mavra, the future of remote collaboration. New vision. New team. New launch. December 3rd, local investor gala and relaunch party. Hosted at the Glass House Pavilion. Keynote by Greg Turner. I blinked at the screen. Read it again. Greg was relaunching Mavra, the same company he begged me to save, the one that blew up in his face. And he was throwing a gala? I don't know what got to me more, the audacity, or the fact that he had the nerve to use the same name, same logo, same smug tone, as if none of it had ever happened. I called Josh. He picked up on the second ring. "Hey, you serious about this flyer?" He sighed. "I got it from Mom. She sent it to the whole family group chat." Said Greg's bouncing back better than ever. "Group chat I'm not in, I'm guessing. You were removed." Quietly. After the dinner. I nodded to myself, jaw tightening. "Is he getting new investors?" I asked. "Looks like it. Word is he found a smaller firm, some real estate guys pivoting into tech. But they're local, trying to make a splash. That's what the gala's for." Something about it didn't sit right. The timing, the location, the image of it. Greg wasn't just relaunching a company. He was relaunching his reputation. And he was doing it in my town. The same town where he dragged my name through the mud. Where he poisoned my reputation. Where he let our parents humiliate me publicly while he posed like a fallen hero. Sarah walked into the room just as I hung up. "What's wrong?" I told her. Showed her the flyer. Watched her eyebrows rise slowly. "So he's back to playing king," she said. "Yeah." She sat across from me, sipping her tea. "Are you going to the gala?" I laughed. "What, crash it? Walk in with a wrench over my shoulder and remind him how this all started?" She tilted her head. "Not a terrible idea." I grinned. But then I stopped. Because something in me shifted. Not in the petty way. Not in the "I'm going to ruin his night" kind of way. More like, what if this is the moment I stop playing defense? What if, instead of just moving on, I make a point? I spent that night at the shop alone. Sarah had gone to visit her sister, and I stayed late, walking the perimeter of the new space, staring at the walls, the floors, the lift I installed myself, the spray-painted Blake's Garage sign that hung from the front awning. Everything smelled like rubber and coffee and ambition. Then I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. And I started planning. Step 1 was simple: get in the room. The gala was invite only, black tie, RSVP through Mavra's website. So I RSVP'd. Not as Blake from Blake's Garage. No, I created a dummy LLC, something quiet, clean, tech-sounding. Torque Ventures LLC. I figured it was poetic. A little wink to what I actually did. I bought a $120 suit, rented nice shoes, and cleaned up my beard. Sarah was all in the moment I told her. "You're going to look so out of place in that room," she said. I smiled. That's the point. Step 2, gather information. I started talking to people. Quietly. Reached out to clients who worked in local business. One guy, Larry, who owned a security firm, had been approached by Mavra for private event coverage. Another, Jenna, ran a catering company that Greg's team had hired for the food. Both let things slip. Greg was trying to impress a very specific investor that night. a regional venture capital guy named Pierce Rowland, known for turning mid-sized startups into acquisition bait. Greg had apparently been courting him for months. This gala? It was his big swing, which meant I knew exactly where the pressure point was. Step 3. Gather allies. I called Josh again. I'm going to the Mavra event, I said. Bold. I need a favor. He hesitated. I've got my kids that weekend. It's one night. I just need you to get me something. What? A list of attendees. He exhaled. You know I'm not really a part of Greg's thing, right? But Mom is. Josh sighed. All right. I'll see what I can do. 2 days later, he texted me a PDF. List of 117 confirmed attendees. A mix of local business people, influencers, reporters, and a handful of investment scouts. Perfect. I highlighted 2 names, Pierce Rowland, and a woman named Linda Vance, a mid-tier tech journalist who ran a popular newsletter called Second Wave Startups. She was known for sniffing out red flags in recycled companies. I had a feeling she'd appreciate what I had to offer. Step 4. Compile evidence. I spent the next week documenting everything. Mavra's original failure, the bankruptcy filings, the unpaid invoices I'd found online from former contractors, a series of now-deleted tweets where Greg blamed lazy devs and market sabotage for the crash. Then I pulled together screenshots of the Facebook smear campaign my mom started. The narrative? A startup founder who burned his last company to the ground, begged his working-class brother for a bailout, then publicly humiliated him when he said no. I packaged it all into a sleek, discreet PDF, titled, Rebuilt Reputation or Recycled Failure. A cautionary tale. Final step? Wait. I knew I only had one shot at this. If I came in too hot, I'd look bitter. Too soft, and they'd ignore me. I needed to pick the exact moment where Greg's ego was at full volume, when the lights were brightest and he was in the spotlight. I had to let him feel like he'd won. So I waited. December 3rd. The Glass House Pavilion. It was a rainy night, and the venue shimmered with reflections from the city skyline. Tuxedos, champagne, fake smiles. I walked in, nodded at the bouncer, handed over my Torque Ventures LLC invite, and stepped into the lion's den. And there he was, Greg, wearing a midnight blue suit, holding court near the bar, laughing too loudly at his own joke. He didn't recognize me at first, but oh, he would. I mingled, listened, watched, waited, and then, just as Greg took the stage to deliver his keynote speech, I reached into my pocket, pulled out 2 envelopes, and handed one to Linda Vance. The other went to Pierce Rowland, and as Greg cleared his throat, smiling like he was untouchable, both of them began to read. And that was the moment the wheels started turning. The sound system crackled slightly as Greg took the stage, bathed in that soft blue uplight venues love so much, designed to make someone look expensive. He tapped the microphone once, leaned in, and delivered his opening line with all the smug confidence of a man who thought he'd already won. Good evening, everyone. My name is Greg Turner, founder and CEO of Mavra, and tonight marks not just a relaunch, but a rebirth. Polite applause followed. A few nods, some champagne sips. Investors settled in, attention fixed. I stayed near the back of the room, just out of the spotlight, nursing a ginger ale in a rocks glass to look the part. My suit was still stiff from the dry cleaner. My hands, buried deep in my pockets, were shaking, but not with nerves. It was adrenaline. Anticipation. That quiet hum you feel right before something irreversible happens. I watched Linda Vance lower her envelope halfway through Greg's second slide, her expression unreadable. But her eyes kept flicking between him and the pages she held. She was scribbling something in the margins. Pierce Rowland, sitting 2 rows from the stage, wasn't even pretending to hide it. His head was tilted down, flipping through each page slowly. His assistant, a younger guy in horn-rimmed glasses, leaned over once to whisper something. Then they both stopped watching the presentation altogether. Greg didn't notice. Of course he didn't. He was in his element, pacing the stage, spouting off buzzwords, name-dropping defunct tech accelerators he once networked with at a conference in Austin. I counted at least 4 slides that had graphs with no data, just upward trending arrows and vague labels like user synergy growth and projected Q2 pivot efficiency. Then came his favorite part, the resilience narrative. He lowered his voice, got that rehearsed tremble in his tone. Last year, Mavra hit turbulence. But like all great ventures, We used failure as a foundation. I learned. I rebuilt. I sacrificed. Sacrificed? I felt my jaw tighten. He kept going. And through that storm, I leaned on the people who truly believed in me, my family, my investors, my mentors. And I want to especially thank those who stood by me when others walked away. Sarah, standing a few feet behind me, quietly slipped her hand into mine. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. We were here. We'd waited. And now, the trap was about to spring. Greg wrapped up the presentation to a soft round of applause, more polite than enthusiastic. He flashed that signature grin, the one I'd seen since we were kids, the one that always said I got away with it again. But this time he hadn't. Within 15 minutes, Linda Vance was gone. She didn't even stop to eat. Just disappeared out the side entrance, envelope in hand, phone already pressed to her ear. I would find out later that she went straight to her hotel room, started drafting a newsletter that would hit 40,000 inboxes the next morning. As for Pierce, he stayed. But he didn't clap. He didn't smile. When Greg finally made his way down to schmooze and pose for photos, Pierce intercepted him near the bar. I couldn't hear what was said, but I watched it all. Greg approached with his arms out, clearly expecting congratulations. Pierce didn't even shake his hand. He handed Greg the now creased envelope, said something short, one sentence, maybe two, and turned away. Greg stood frozen for a second, confused, flipping through the pages as the color drained from his face. I saw his fingers twitch slightly, like he wasn't sure whether to throw the papers down or fold them into his jacket. He chose the latter. Barely. It was poetic. The crowd didn't notice. Not yet. But the storm had started. Within an hour, 2 investors slipped out early. One of them was approached by Greg's assistant near the exit. Judging by the hand gestures and rapid blinking, it didn't go well. The buzz around the cheese table had shifted. I overheard phrases like, "Wasn't this the same company?" And "That's not what he told me last quarter." And then, just as Sarah and I were slipping out the door, Greg saw me. Our eyes locked across the lobby. I didn't flinch. I didn't smile. But he knew. I could see it in the way his expression dropped, his lips parting just slightly, the muscles in his jaw clenching like he'd bitten down on a wire. I didn't stop walking. I didn't need to say a word. I'd already spoken through the receipts. The fallout came fast. The next morning, Linda's newsletter dropped. Headline: Mavra, the phoenix that forgot it already burned. It was brutal. She detailed the history of the company, its collapse, the unpaid contractors, the public smear campaign launched against dissenters, aka me, and the fact that Greg had rebranded the exact same shell with new window dressing, hoping no one would notice. She called out the gala as a smoke and mirrors attempt to lure fresh capital from local investors unfamiliar with the company's past behavior. She even included a link to the Facebook post my mother wrote, the one blaming me for Greg's failure. Under it, she asked, "If this is how leadership treats family, imagine how it treats employees." It went viral within hours. By lunch, Mavra's new Twitter account was locked. The website was under maintenance. And Pierce Rowland released a statement through his PR team saying he had declined to pursue further involvement with the company after discovering material misrepresentations in its relaunch narrative. That phrase, material misrepresentations, was like a death knell. 2 days later, Greg posted a 3-minute Instagram video. He was sitting in his car, hoodie pulled up, voice trembling. Not from tears, Greg doesn't cry, but from sheer frustration. He blamed internet trolls and bad actors for sabotaging his relaunch. Said he'd been targeted. Claimed the journalist had an agenda. It was pitiful. I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Everyone else did it for me. Comment sections were flooded with stories from ex-Mavra employees, unpaid interns, and even an old college roommate of Greg's who wrote, "He used to steal protein bars from my drawer and say he was repurposing excess calories." This checks out. But the final blow came from an unlikely place, my father. He called me a week later. I let it go to voicemail. "Blake, your mom and we saw the article. It's a lot. We didn't know everything, and we should have asked more questions. Look, I know we messed up. Just give us a call when you're ready." He sounded tired. Smaller. I didn't call him back. I waited. Another week passed. Then Sarah and I hosted a small end-of-year barbecue at the garage for friends, employees, and loyal customers. We grilled ribs behind the lift bay, played music, Let kids paint tiny car shapes on old hubcaps as keepsakes. It was wholesome, easy, real. Sometime during dessert, Josh showed up. He was holding a box. Inside, a set of old family photos. Me and Greg at ages 9 and 14, covered in mud from a backyard football game. One of Mom holding all three of us in front of the Christmas tree. And at the bottom, a framed photo of my wedding, the one where Greg made the awful toast. Someone had cropped him out. Josh cleared his throat. Mom gave these to me. Said maybe you should have them now. I looked up at him. What changed? She read the article, he said simply. Then she read the comments. He didn't stay long. Just hugged me once and left. That night, Sarah and I stood inside the shop, surrounded by laughter, music, and the smell of charcoal and motor oil. She looked up at me and smiled. So now what? I thought about it for a second. Looked around at everything we'd built. The coffee corner. The fresh red doors. The sign above the lift that read, Blake's Garage, built, not borrowed. I put my arm around her and said, now we keep building. Because the truth is, revenge isn't about destroying someone else. It's about making sure they can never destroy you again. And from where I was standing, I'd already won. I'm Alex. I'm 34 years old. And if I'm being honest, I've never really felt like I belonged in my family. It's not some teenage angst thing that I carried into adulthood. It's deeper than that. Like no matter how much I achieved, how hard I tried to be seen or respected, it never quite registered. I was always the quiet one, the late bloomer, the one who didn't follow the traditional path. While my sister got married at 27 and was pregnant with her second kid by 30, I was still figuring things out, switching careers, renting a modest apartment, and trying to rebuild after a rough breakup that none of them had asked about. Not even once. The baby shower was at my parents' house. The same two-story place I grew up in, where the floorboards still creaked in the same places and the kitchen clock had been broken for so long that it had become part of the decor. I hadn't wanted to go. I sat in my car for a full 10 minutes outside, engine off, watching balloons flap in the breeze on the mailbox, wondering what version of me they were waiting to judge this time. But I went in. Of course I did. Because even after everything, a part of me still hoped it would be different. The living room was packed. Pink streamers, diaper-shaped party favors, the smell of lemon bars and pot roast. My sister, Camilla, was glowing, not just in the pregnant, radiant sense, but in that self-satisfied way she always wore when she knew the attention was all on her. I handed her my gift, a neatly wrapped baby monitor set, in a plain white envelope. Her eyes skimmed over it, clearly unimpressed. She handed it off to my cousin without even a thank you. The comments started early. My mom was the first to strike. We were in the kitchen, filling our plates. She picked up a deviled egg, glanced at me, and said with a smirk, "Let's hope you never have kids. You can barely take care of yourself." She said it lightly, like a joke, but didn't even wait for a laugh before walking away. I stood there, frozen, holding my plate like a shield, unsure if I should say something or just swallow it down like usual. Then came my aunt, Cheryl, always the one to put things nicely, which somehow made it worse. She leaned over while I was setting down a tray of cookies I'd brought, her voice low, but not nearly low enough. "Still no partner?" "Poor thing," she murmured, then tacked on. "But don't worry, not everyone's meant to be a parent." I didn't respond. I just walked away again, mouth dry, ears hot. I found a quiet spot near the back patio, next to a half-dead houseplant and a table stacked with unopened gifts. For a few minutes, I just watched people mill around, cousins chatting about renovations and real estate, uncles talking about their retirement accounts, the younger generation glued to their phones. No one came over. Not to say hello, not to ask how I was doing. I was there, but invisible, like furniture. Then Camilla's husband, Brent, tapped a glass and made some loud, cringy joke about starting the unwrapping, while everyone still had energy. Camilla sat in the center of the living room like a queen, throne and all. People gathered. Phones came out. I stayed back. Gift after gift was opened. Matching onesies. Diaper subscriptions. Handmade blankets from Grandma. The baby monitor was tossed aside with barely a glance, and when the white envelope came up, Camilla smiled a little wider. "Oh, mysterious," she said. She tore it open with exaggerated curiosity, held up the check, and gasped. 100,000? She said, her voice climbing 2 octaves. "Alex, you gave us a check for $100,000. The room quieted. All eyes turned to me. A few people even clapped. Someone said, "Well, guess you've been doing something right after all," and the laughter bubbled up like champagne foam. My mom blinked, then gave a strained, polite smile. "That's unexpected," she said, and nothing more. I should have felt proud, triumphant, but instead, I just felt cold. Because the truth was, that check wasn't really meant for Camilla. It wasn't even meant to be flashy. It was the last of a bonus I'd gotten from a tech deal that had finally paid off after 5 years of insane work. I'd been saving it for something meaningful, something to finally earn their respect, their warmth, maybe, stupidly, their love. But as I stood there, staring at their smug, surprised faces, the clapping died down and someone, I think it was my cousin Jared, called out, "At least pretend to be useful and take the trash out, would you?" More laughter, even from my mom. She laughed, then waved her hand like it was no big deal. "Oh, stop it," she said, though she didn't look at me. She looked past me, like I wasn't even there. Something in me cracked. I didn't say a word. I stepped forward, walked to the center of the room, past the food, past the awkward stares, past the camera still filming. I reached for the envelope. Camilla instinctively held it closer to her chest, but then, sensing no threat, handed it to me with a small frown, like she was annoyed I was ruining the moment. I opened it slowly, pulled out the check, held it up so everyone could see, and tore it in half. Then I tore it again, and again, until the pieces were falling like confetti. The silence was instant. Heavy. You could hear someone drop a fork onto a plate in the kitchen. No one moved. No one laughed now. Not even Jared. I looked at Camilla. Her mouth hung open. I looked at my mom. Her face had frozen mid-expression, some mixture of shock and outrage she hadn't figured out how to land on yet. I didn't explain myself. Not one word. I turned, walked toward the front door, and stepped out into the cool afternoon air. My shoes crunched against the gravel as I made my way to the car. I could still feel every pair of eyes on my back, still hear the silence I'd left behind. Not a single person had called after me. Not yet, at least. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, heart pounding not from fear, but from the kind of clarity that only comes when a line has finally been crossed. A line that I had allowed them to dance over for far too long. I stared at the house through the windshield. The place I'd grown up in. The place where I was made to feel like a permanent disappointment. Where every achievement was either ignored or twisted into something selfish or insufficient. Where I was expected to give and give and give, and be grateful just for being tolerated. I didn't start the car. Not yet. Because I knew what was coming. Sure enough, less than a minute later, the front door opened. It was Camilla. Her expression was still stunned, but now tinged with anger, like I'd just ruined her wedding day. She stood there on the porch, looking around like she expected someone to be filming her righteous outrage for social media. Then she spotted me in the car and stormed down the front steps, her arms crossing over her chest in that defensive way she always used when she couldn't find the words to justify herself. She marched up to the window and tapped once. I rolled it down halfway. "You're seriously insane," she snapped, not even trying to keep her voice down. "You think this makes you some kind of a martyr? You embarrassed me. In front of everyone." I didn't flinch. I didn't do anything but reclaim what was mine. That was a gift. No, that was a bribe for decency. And you all failed the test before I even handed it over. Camilla scoffed. "Oh, come on. You're so sensitive. We were joking. That's just how the family talks." "You weren't joking," I said quietly. "You've never been joking." That gave her pause. For half a second, something flickered across her face, like maybe she understood that this wasn't about a check, or a party, or a single comment. But then she recovered, rolled her eyes. "Mom's pissed, you know." "Good," I said, and started the car. Camilla took a step back, clearly expecting me to explain more. But I didn't know her that. I didn't know any of them anything. As I pulled away, I saw my aunt standing in the doorway with her arms folded, shaking her head like I was the problem. Behind her, Jared had already gone back to the food table. Business as usual, of course. But I wasn't driving home. I was driving to the bank. Because that check wasn't the only thing I'd brought with me to the baby shower. I'd brought another envelope. One I had kept in the glove box, just in case. And now, as I stopped at a red light and reached for it, I felt the corner of my mouth twitch upward for the first time that day. The second envelope didn't hold a check. It held a stack of notarized documents. Legal ones. Quiet ones. See, a few years ago, my grandfather, the only family member who ever truly believed in me, left me the executor rights to a trust fund. A large one. One that my parents and Camilla didn't even realize was connected to them, because it had been set up decades ago under a different name. Granddad's little secret. He used to call it insurance. I didn't touch it for years. I let them think he left me a couple old tools from the garage and a handwritten note, which he did. But the real inheritance had strings that I now legally controlled. And after the way today went, I was ready to pull them. So I parked the car, walked into the bank, and handed over the forms to my advisor. "Is this final?" she asked, double-checking the signatures. "Yes," I said. "Effective immediately. Freeze the accounts. Stop all future payments. Cancel any pending transfers to the names listed on page 3. Her eyes flicked over the names. "Your family. Let's just call them former beneficiaries," I said. She didn't ask any more questions. That's what I liked about her. Efficient. Discreet. When I got back into the car, my phone had already started buzzing. First from Mom. Then Camilla. Then Dad. Surprisingly, though his message was just 3 words, "What did you do?" I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I drove downtown and checked into a hotel. Not because I didn't have a place to go, but because I needed peace. I needed silence that didn't feel like judgment. I needed a long bath, a room where I wasn't being watched or evaluated, and a moment to decide what came next. And as I sat on the bed with my phone still lighting up every few seconds, I realized something. For the first time in years, I had the power. Not because of money, not even because of the trust, but because I finally stopped asking to be loved by people who only knew how to control. I put the phone on silent, set it face down, and lay back on the pillow. Tomorrow, I'd respond. Tomorrow, I'd let them know exactly what they'd lost. But for tonight, I just closed my eyes and listened to nothing but the hum of the air conditioner. They'd wanted to see if I could be useful. Now they'd see just how useful I'd been all along. And they wouldn't like it. The next morning, I woke up to the pale gray light filtering in through the curtains, the kind that makes everything look softer than it is. I sat up slowly, still in that quiet mental space where nothing had quite caught up with me yet. But then I grabbed my phone, flipped it over, and the weight of it all came rushing back. 37 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and a string of texts that got increasingly unhinged as the night wore on. The earliest ones were from my mom. "Alex, call me when you get a chance." Then, was that really necessary? By midnight, it had turned into, "You have no idea how much stress you've caused. This was your sister's special day. Camilla's were shorter, but sharper. You're disgusting. You made me look like a fool. Fix this." Brent, surprisingly, sent just one message. "Look, man, I get it, but can we talk?" That one made me pause. I never had a real problem with Brent. He always struck me as more of an accessory than an active participant in the family drama. But then again, he never stepped in either. Never told Camilla to tone it down. Never stood up when I was being humiliated, even in front of him. I deleted the message. Then I opened my laptop. I had made up my mind sometime around 3 a.m., lying in the dark hotel room with only the soft mechanical buzz of the mini fridge and the distant hum of the elevator down the hall. This wasn't just about the baby shower. It was about everything. Years of being spoken down to, dismissed, ignored, treated like I was some wandering failure who hadn't grown up the way they wanted. All while I quietly built a life that they never cared to understand. It was time to stop playing by their rules. I logged into the trust account dashboard. It wasn't just the family fund my grandfather left. Over the past few years, I'd grown the investments, managed distributions, and even created separate portfolios to support charitable causes in his name, which, of course, no one in the family knew about. To them, Granddad was just the grumpy old man who liked puzzles and coffee that tasted like burnt leaves. But to me, he was the only one who ever looked me in the eye and meant it when he said, "You're going to do things your way." And I'm proud of that. There were 3 beneficiaries still listed on one of the active accounts: my mom, Camilla, and Aunt Cheryl. All automatic payments, a monthly stipend for my mom, covering some of her personal expenses and retail therapy, a quarterly lump sum to Camilla, disguised as support for young mothers, set up long before she ever became one, and a yearly bonus to Cheryl, because my grandfather always said she helped care for him when he was sick. In reality, she stopped visiting him in his last year. I knew that. I had the logs. but I hadn't changed it until now. Click. Pause. Confirm removal. It was all done in less than a minute. I sat back in the chair, watching the screen refresh. The names vanished from the active list, and with it, so did every cent that had been flowing into their lives from this quiet, invisible source. They'd never bothered to ask where the extra money came from. They just assumed it was from the estate, or what was owed. And I had let them believe that, because I didn't care to correct them. Because for a long time, I was afraid of what would happen if I stopped giving. But now I wanted them to feel it, not out of spite, but because sometimes the only way to make people see you is to take away what they never appreciated in the first place. I crafted a message, not to Camilla, or Mom, or Cheryl, but to the extended family group chat that we all still technically belong to. The same one where they posted wedding photos, ultrasound images, and announcements about birthdays I wasn't invited to. I stared at the blinking cursor for a long time. Then I typed. Yesterday, I tore up a $100,000 check because I realized something. I've spent years giving to people who only know how to take. That ends now. If you're confused, you'll understand soon. If you're angry, ask yourself why. And if you're thinking about calling me, don't. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Until then, I suggest everyone checks their bank statements. Then I hit send. 5 minutes of silence. Then the typing bubble started. One by one. Some from cousins who had nothing to do with the shower. One from Uncle James, who wrote, "What is going on?" And another from a distant second cousin. "Dude, you tore up a $100K check?" Camilla didn't reply in the group, but she texted me directly, moments later. "You petty selfish." I didn't read the rest. Instead, I blocked her. I blocked my mom too, and Aunt Cheryl, one by one. Not forever, but long enough for them to realize that silence wasn't weakness. It was power. I spent the next few hours calling the charities my grandfather used to support. We expanded their disbursements, doubled them in some cases. I allocated part of the frozen funds towards setting up a scholarship in his name, specifically for students who had been written off by their families. Because that's what I'd been. And now, finally, I wasn't. I was building something that mattered, not just for myself, but in his honor. Quietly, purposefully. I didn't know what would come next. But then, just as I was about to shut my laptop, my phone buzzed again. A new number. Not one I recognized. I stared at the screen, then picked up. A voice I hadn't heard in years said, "Hey, it's Dad. I think we need to talk." And just like that, a door I hadn't expected opened. But I wasn't sure if I wanted to walk through it. I stared at the screen for a few seconds, unsure whether I had read it right. Dad. The name didn't show up on my caller ID because I deleted his contact years ago, back when he left us. Or, more accurately, back when he stopped pretending to be part of the family. One day he just vanished. No fight, no dramatic scene, just gone. Mom always said it was because he couldn't handle responsibility. Camilla, already Dad's favorite, said it was because I was such a disappointment, like he couldn't bear watching me flounder around while she rose through life like some shining star. I believed them for a while, but then I found the letters, stuffed in the back of the hall closet one summer while I was helping Mom reorganize. Unopened envelopes, all addressed to me in handwriting I hadn't seen since I was 10. Dozens of them. I never said a word, just took the box and went home. And that night, I read them all. Every apology, every update, every expression of love and guilt. He never stopped writing. Mom just never gave them to me. I hadn't heard from him since. Until now. I stared at the text. Reread it. "Hey, it's Dad. I think we need to talk." I typed one word back. "Okay." 10 minutes later, we were on the phone. It was awkward at first. Tentative. But something about hearing his voice after so many years, it cracked something open in me. He didn't ask what happened. He'd already heard. Apparently, one of my younger cousins had posted a play-by-play of the baby shower disaster in a group chat that somehow made its way to a Facebook post. From there, it spread like wildfire. He laughed softly. "I'm not saying you should have torn the check," he said, "but I can't lie. I'm a little proud." That made me laugh too. The first real laugh I'd had in days. We talked for over an hour. About what happened. About Mom. About the family, the old house, and how it had always felt like walking on glass. I told him about Granddad's trust, the years I spent managing it, the scholarship I was creating. He told me where he'd gone, why he left, how things fell apart between him and Mom long before I was old enough to notice. He didn't try to justify it. He just said, "I failed. but I never stopped thinking about you. We agreed to meet for lunch that weekend. It was strange, walking into the cafe and recognizing someone I hadn't seen since childhood. His hair was grayer, his frame smaller, but his eyes, those were the same. We hugged. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And that was enough. A few days later, I posted an update to the family group chat. I kept it short. Some of you have reached out. I'm not interested in apologies that come with strings. But if you genuinely want to make things right, start by acknowledging how you've treated me. Not yesterday. For years. Until then, we have nothing to discuss. Mom didn't reply. Neither did Camilla. But I got a message from my younger cousin Emily, the only one who ever sat with me at holiday dinners when no one else had a seat for me. She wrote, "I'm sorry. I saw it all happen and I didn't say anything. I should have. If you ever want to talk, I'd love to catch up. You didn't deserve any of that." I told her I appreciated it. I did. A week later, my mom finally sent a message. Not a call. Not a visit. Just a single text. "I hope you're happy with the mess you made." That was it. No apology. No explanation. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the attorney I'd been working with for the trust. We had previously talked about converting part of it into a nonprofit foundation, not just for scholarships, but for mental health support, housing aid, and career training for young adults who had been emotionally or financially abandoned by their families. I'd been hesitant at first. Now I was ready. We named it the Atlas Initiative, after my grandfather, whose middle name was Atlas, and who always said, "Even when the weight of the world is on your shoulders, you still get to choose where you walk." The launch happened quietly. No press, no gala, just a soft rollout online and a few partner organizations. I funded the first year entirely on my own. Within a month, I had 15 applicants. By the end of the year, we'd helped over 70 young adults. Housing, counseling, mentorship, emergency grants. Real help. Quiet help. And then came the email. It was from Camilla. No subject line. No greeting. Just a wall of text. She was furious. Said I had humiliated her for no reason. That I took joy in destroying her baby's shower. That mom was still recovering from the emotional trauma. That the missing money had forced them to reconsider plans for the nursery, the lease, the baby's college fund. The nerve of her, acting like that check was owed to her. And then, at the very bottom, "You've always been jealous of me. Admit it. You never had what I had. And instead of finding your own way, you just ruined what I built." I didn't reply. I archived the email and created a folder called Delusions. I didn't need to fight her anymore. I had nothing to prove. Not to her. Not to Mom. Not to any of them. But I did send one more message that week. It was a handwritten letter. To my grandfather's old friend, Mr. Jennings, the quiet accountant who helped set up the original trust and once told me, "Your grandfather knew this day might come. That's why he gave you the keys." I wrote, "Thank you for believing in him and for helping him believe in me." The family didn't see it, but he did. And because of that, I do too now. A month later, I visited Granddad's grave. I hadn't been back since the funeral. I brought a single white rose and a folded piece of paper. I knelt beside the stone, placed the note beneath the rose, and whispered, "I did it." I finally walked away. Then I stood up and walked home, not to the old house, not to the memories, but to the life I had built, the life they never thought I could make. I still get messages sometimes, from relatives trying to sneak their way back into my good graces. Some try to guilt me. Others just want money. A few, like Emily, are genuine. I've reconnected with her. We even had coffee recently and laughed about how Grandma's fruitcake could have been used as a lethal weapon. It felt good, real. And as for Dad, we've met for lunch every other Sunday since that first call. It's still a bit awkward sometimes. But he shows up. He listens. He never tries to explain away the past. He just tries to be there. And for me, that's enough. I don't know what the future looks like. But I do know this. When you stop begging to be seen and start walking away, you find the kind of peace that no approval can match. And sometimes, you find something even better than peace. You find yourself. My name's Jonah. I'm 26 years old, and I used to think birthdays were supposed to feel like a celebration. For most people, they probably do. Cake, hugs, laughter, maybe some awkward singing. But for me, birthdays have always felt like walking into a trap you didn't know was set. Every year, my family used the excuse of tradition to disguise what really felt like some twisted roast session where I was always the punchline. Still, Part of me kept showing up. Maybe out of habit. Maybe out of hope that one year, they'd surprise me. Not with a gift, but with a shred of respect. This year was no different. At least, that's what I thought walking into my mom's house. Past the same chipped lion statue on the porch, the one she always said made the house look expensive. The dining room table was already set with her usual half-effort. Plastic tablecloth, mismatched plates, a tray of slightly burnt lasagna that reeked of guilt cooking. My brother Dylan was leaning back in a chair, balancing it on two legs like a 10-year-old, even though he's 29. My mom was fluttering around with a fake smile like she was playing a sitcom mom on mute. My dad, as usual, wasn't there. Said he was working, but I knew it meant he was sitting in his truck watching sports on his phone just to avoid all of us. The moment I stepped in, no one even looked up. Not right away. Dylan glanced at me and gave a half smirk. "Look who remembered he has a family," he muttered. I bit my tongue. I'd promised myself not to react this year. Just get through the dinner, be polite, and go home. But even then, the weight was already forming behind my eyes. We sat. We ate. Or rather, they ate. I pushed some lasagna around and forced a few bites down. Most of the conversation was just Dylan talking about some crypto coin he was investing in and how he was this close to buying a Tesla. Mom kept nodding like he was reciting gospel. When I tried to chime in once, mentioned a new client I'd landed at the firm I just got hired at, Dylan waved his hand dismissively. "Cool," he said, not even looking at me. "Is that like a real job now? Or just another project?" His voice dripped sarcasm. My mom chuckled like he'd said something witty. I stared at my plate, trying to count how many more minutes I'd have to fake a smile. Then came the part one always dreaded, the birthday moment. Mom disappeared into the hallway and returned holding a card, just one, and handed it to me with this tight-lipped grin. "Here," she said flatly, like she was handing me a receipt. "You're lucky we even remembered you this year." I looked at her, trying to see if she was joking. She wasn't. Before I could even react, Dylan leaned in and added with a snort, "Don't spend it all in one place." "Oh wait, it's empty." He burst out laughing at his own joke. My mom smiled politely, like she wasn't sure if she should be amused. I didn't say anything for a second. I just opened the card. It was blank. Not even a scribbled "Happy Birthday." Just a generic printed message that said something about another year older. No gift. No note. Not even my name written inside. And that's when something in me cracked. Not snapped. Not exploded. Just cracked. Like the quiet sound of ice splitting in a glass. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't slam the table. I just sat up straighter and looked them both dead in the eyes. "You know," I said calmly, "I was actually going to surprise you guys tonight." Dylan raised an eyebrow, still grinning like he was watching a stand-up routine. "Oh yeah? Surprise us with what?" "A coupon for therapy." I smiled. "I just got hired by a firm that pays me more in 1 month than either of you have made this entire year." The room fell quiet. For the first time that night, Dylan didn't have a comeback ready. My mom blinked, her mouth twitching like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. "And I was going to give you both something," I added, reaching into the inside pocket of my jacket. Their eyes followed my hand like I was drawing a gun. Instead, I pulled out a crisp envelope, sealed in gold foil, thick enough to hold a small wad of cash, or, what it actually held, a personal check. $25,000. Taxed and clean. No strings attached. Just something I'd planned to give them as a thank you. For all the years they didn't support me. For all the times I'd paid my own tuition, skipped meals to afford rent, taught myself every skill that finally got me to where I am. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd be proud. Maybe it would start something better. But now, I opened the envelope, held up the check between my fingers, and then slowly, deliberately, tore it down the center. One rip, then another, right down to confetti. Dylan's jaw dropped. "What?" My mom reached out like she could catch the pieces as they fell onto the lasagna. "I was going to give you that," I said quietly. But then I realized, why should I keep rewarding people who treat me like an obligation? I stood up, buttoned my jacket, and walked to the door. No one stopped me. No one said a word. Just silence. Thick and heavy. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, I turned back for one last look. Dylan was still frozen, hand half raised like he might lunge for the torn check. My mom's eyes had gone wide. I didn't say goodbye, but I did smile. And then, right as I opened the door to leave, a sound stopped me in my tracks. A voice. It was my mom. Quiet. barely above a whisper. "Jonah, wait." I didn't turn around right away. Her voice was so soft I almost convinced myself I imagined it. But I felt it land, that faint thread of hesitation in her tone, something I hadn't heard from her in years. Not when I begged for support in college. Not when I showed her my first freelance contract. Not even when I called her after my appendix ruptured, alone in a hospital bed, and she said she was too busy to come. But now, suddenly, she had something to say. I turned back, slowly. She was still standing at the table, arms crossed over her chest like she wasn't sure if she wanted to fight or fold. Dylan looked at her, then at me, clearly confused. Whatever she was about to say, he hadn't expected it either. "I didn't know you were doing so well," she said, eyes flicking to the shredded checks still scattered across the table like snow. I stared at her. "Why would you? You've never asked." She flinched. "Barely. But it was enough. A crack in the armor." I took a few steps back into the room, just far enough to meet her eyes across the table. "You always assumed I'd fail. Every time I tried something different, writing, design, working with startups, you mocked it. You mocked me. Remember when I told you I wanted to learn UX design, and you said I'd end up flipping burgers?" Her mouth opened slightly, but nothing came out. "And Dylan," I looked at him, "you've been cashing mom's guilt checks since you were 20. You spent 6 months living in her basement rent-free because you needed to focus on your YouTube channel. But I'm the one you call a joke." He rolled his eyes, but there was no comeback this time. Just silence. I exhaled slowly. "You want to know the truth? I didn't come here for the food. Or even for the fake card. I came here because a part of me still believed maybe, you'd see me. Not the version you made fun of. Not the backup son who was too quiet, too nerdy, too independent. Just me." My voice cracked a little at that last word, and I hated that it did. I wasn't trying to cry. I didn't want to give them that. But years of built-up disappointment don't drain cleanly. They leak. In the corners of your voice. In the ache in your chest when you try to sound stronger than you feel. There was a long, dragging silence. My mom sat down. Her hands were clasped together, white-knuckled. I could see something flickering behind her eyes. Regret. Maybe, or the distant echo of it. But she didn't apologize. Not yet. Instead, she said, "We didn't think you needed us." That stung. Worse than any insult. "So you decided to punish me for being self-sufficient?" "I didn't mean it like that," she said quickly. "It's just you always had your own thing going. You never asked for help." I shook my head. "That's not true." I asked. "You didn't listen." The moment sat between us like a boulder in the middle of the room. Dylan stood up, finally, arms out like he was trying to reset the tone. "Okay, look, this is getting dramatic. We were just joking earlier. I mean, come on, it's not that deep." I laughed. It came out sharper than I meant it to. "Not that deep. You humiliated me in front of the entire family last year because I couldn't afford to fly home for Thanksgiving. You posted a picture of the empty seat at the table and captioned it, 'Guess you can't count on everyone.' Then had the nerve to tag me." He scoffed. "It was a joke." "No, Dylan. You were the joke. You just don't realize it yet." He stepped forward. "Say that again." I didn't blink. "You are the joke." His jaw clenched, but he didn't move. Mom looked between us like she was watching a volcano about to erupt. But I didn't want to fight. I was done fighting. I was done performing. I took a breath and spoke with finality. "You know what's funny?" I asked. "I spent years thinking if I just got successful enough, you'd all treat me with respect. Like I had to earn it. But now that I have it, I finally see it wasn't worth earning from you in the first place." I turned to leave again. No dramatic pause this time. No mic drop. Just exhaustion. But as I opened the door, a new voice piped up. It was Grandma. She'd been silent the entire time, sitting on the recliner in the corner like a piece of forgotten furniture. I thought she was asleep. Honestly, she usually dozed off around dinner. But now, she was wide awake. Her voice was raspy, but firm. "Jonah," she said. I paused. Everyone turned to her, even Dylan. My mom looked startled. "You remember that little red box I gave you when you were 12? She asked. I blinked. "Yeah. Did you ever open it?" "Not yet. You told me to wait until I was grown." She nodded. "Then I think it's time." There was a strange silence after that. Dylan looked confused. My mom seemed uncomfortable. I looked at Grandma, and she just smiled. I didn't say another word. Just stepped outside into the cool night air, my heart still racing, my mind spinning. But now, with one more question than I had before. What was in that box? The ride home felt longer than usual, even though the streets were mostly empty. I kept one hand on the wheel, the other gripping the armrest like it might anchor me to reality. My mind wasn't on the road. It was still back at the dining table, watching the pieces of that check fall like ash, hearing my mother's voice trying to pass off a decade of neglect as a misunderstanding, and my brother standing there, shocked that the one person he thought was beneath him had just walked out and slammed the door behind him, figuratively and literally. But Grandma's words haunted me. Did you ever open it? I hadn't. I'd kept it. Through 3 apartments, 2 cities, and one very long period of wondering if anyone in my family had ever actually loved me, or just tolerated me because they had to. The box had followed me like a relic. It was red, small enough to fit in my palm, wrapped in faded satin, with a little golden clasp. I remembered her giving it to me in the backyard during my 12th birthday party, whispering that it was for later when the noise of everyone else quiets down. Back then, I didn't get it. Tonight I did. When I finally got home, I didn't go to bed. I didn't even take off my shoes. I walked straight to the bookshelf where I'd tucked the box behind an old dictionary I never used. I took it down carefully, like it might crumble in my hands. I sat at the kitchen table and just stared at it for a while. The golden clasp still gleamed, untouched by time. My fingers hovered over it. Something inside me hesitated, not because I was afraid, but because I wasn't sure I could handle more emotions tonight. But curiosity won. It always does. Click. The lid opened with a quiet snap. Inside was a folded note and an envelope, thick, sealed with wax. My heart jumped. I unfolded the note first. Her handwriting was shaky but still elegant, like calligraphy that had lived through storms. Jonah, you've always been the quiet one. The one who didn't need noise to feel full. That's why they never saw your worth. They were too busy talking to hear you. But I saw you. This family, we have patterns. Cycles that repeat until someone breaks them. I hoped you would be that someone. I gave this to you because I knew one day they'd try to convince you you were less than them. That you were a footnote in your own story. You're not. The envelope is yours now. Use it however you want. Or don't. But know this, you were always my favorite. The only one who never pretended to be more than he was. And that made you more than all of them combined. Love always. Grandma. I swallowed hard. My eyes blurred. I didn't even realize I was crying until I blinked and something wet hit the corner of the note. I wiped my face, chest tight with emotion I'd buried so deep I forgot I could even feel it. I looked at the envelope. Heavy. Wax seal still intact. I broke it open with the edge of my house key. Inside was a set of documents. Deeds. One to a lake house I'd never heard of. Another to a safety deposit box in her name, but under a joint account with me. And a final sheet, an addendum to her will. It was dated 3 years ago, to be enacted only upon verbal confirmation from Jonah M. that he has opened the red box entrusted to him on his 12th birthday. As per this instruction, Jonah inherits the following assets in full ownership, with no claims by any other member of the family, including my son, Jonah's uncle, my daughter-in-law, Jonah's mother, and their children. 1 lake house property in Vermont, approximate value $840,000. 1 trust account with dividend income, current balance, $312,000. All remaining jewelry, art, and private collectibles stored in Deposit Box 298C. I sat there stunned, not because of the money, not even because of the lake house, but because someone chose me. Silently, purposefully, fully. In a family that made me feel like background noise, my grandmother had quietly written me in as the main character of her final chapter. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I felt light. The next morning, I called the bank. The deposit box was real. The trust was real. I scheduled a trip to the lake house, also real. I called in a few days off work, not because I needed time, but because I wanted to enjoy this, to let it breathe. But before I could go, before I could even tell anyone outside my closest friends, something happened. It started with a knock. Not a polite knock. Not a neighbor borrowing sugar knock. This was loud, aggressive, like someone was trying to remind me they deserved to be let in. I looked through the peephole. It was my mom. And behind her, Dylan, red-faced, clutching his phone, muttering something I couldn't hear. I didn't open the door, but I could hear her voice through the wood, sharp and high-pitched. Jonah, open this door right now. We need to talk. I stayed silent. Then came the words that made my stomach twist, not with fear, but with a grim sort of satisfaction. We know about the lake house. Grandma told Dylan years ago she was planning to give it to you, but she promised she'd reconsider. That house is part of the family. I leaned against the door, arms crossed. And the trust, Jonah, be reasonable. You weren't supposed to open that box yet. She kept going, pleading, demanding, bargaining. Dylan tried to play it cool, throwing in lines like, we just want to sort things out like adults. And technically, she said it was for all of us, didn't she? I didn't answer, but I knew one thing as I stood there, silent on my side of the door. They had just realized the one person they'd always overlooked was the only one left holding the key to everything they wanted. And I hadn't even started taking it away from them yet. I didn't open the door. Not then. Not even after my mom's shouting gave way to frustrated knocking, and Dylan started pacing the hallway like he thought movement would make his arguments more persuasive. I just stood on the other side of the door, listening, letting their panic sit with them, letting the weight of years of disrespect, dismissal, and belittlement hang in the silence I offered back. They'd never let me speak when I was in the room. Now that they were on the outside, suddenly they were desperate to hear from me. Funny how that works. Eventually, they left. My mom hurled a final guilt-ridden, "This isn't over," over her shoulder before storming off. Dylan muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. It didn't matter. For once, I was the one who didn't need them. The next morning, I drove to Vermont. The lake house was even more stunning than I expected, tucked behind rows of evergreens, with a wraparound porch that faced a pristine, still lake. The water looked like glass, peaceful, untouched. I sat on the dock for hours that first afternoon, my feet dangling above the surface, rereading Grandma's letter. I cried, not out of sadness, but because for the first time in a long time, I felt safe, seen, like I hadn't just survived my upbringing. I'd won against it. Over the next week, I made a plan. I hired a lawyer, one who specialized in estate disputes and family litigation. Just in case, I had no doubt my mother and Dylan would try something. People like them don't give up on what they think they're owed. They just find sneakier ways to take it. I wasn't going to let them. Sure enough, by the time I got back to the city, a letter was waiting for me. From a local attorney representing my mother and brother, claiming that I had unlawfully acquired property that should be shared among rightful heirs, and that due to the verbal statements made by the deceased during family gatherings, they had grounds to contest the will. I laughed when I read it. It was so weak. I wondered if Dylan had written it himself after watching a few episodes of some courtroom drama. Still, I forwarded it to my attorney, who assured me it was nonsense. Grandma's trust and the documents inside the red box were airtight. She hadn't just handed me a surprise. She'd wrapped it in steel and locked it with legal firewalls. And better yet, she'd recorded a video 3 years prior, explaining everything. Why she chose me, how she foresaw this exact reaction from the rest of the family, and explicitly stating that she wanted no one else to touch a single item of what she left me. I watched that video alone in my living room, tears sliding down my face as her soft voice filled the room. In it, she looked frail, older than I remembered, but sharp, unapologetic. "I love my children," she said, "but I'm not blind. Jonah is the only one who's ever shown me kindness without expectation. The only one who sat with me, listened to my stories, and never asked for a check when he left. I see myself in him, the version of me that wanted more from life than just keeping up appearances. That's why he gets everything. And if they're upset, well, that's not my problem anymore, is it?" She smiled at the end. I didn't know how badly I needed that final affirmation until I saw it. The video crushed any chance of a legal challenge. My lawyer sent a copy to their attorney, and within 2 days, I got another letter. This one was short. One sentence. "My clients have chosen to withdraw all claims effective immediately." They knew it was over. Still, that wasn't the end. Not for me. A few days later, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won out. It was my mom. "Jonah," she said softly. Can we talk?" I didn't answer right away. I let the silence stretch. I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know you felt that way. About everything." "You didn't want to know?" I said flatly. There was a pause. "You're probably right," she admitted. "But I'm trying. Can't we just start over?" That made me pause. For years, I'd fantasized about this moment. My mom finally realizing she'd been cruel, finally asking for another chance. But now that it was here, it didn't feel victorious. It felt hollow. Not because I didn't believe she was sorry, but because her apology came after she tried to take something from me again. It wasn't remorse. It was regret for losing. So I said, I think we need space. Real space. Not just a break. You and Dylan made your choices. I made mine. Another silence. Then, quietly, I understand. She hung up before I could say anything else. I haven't spoken to her since. That was over a year ago. Since then, my life has changed in more ways than I can count. I fully renovated the lake house and started spending my weekends there. I launched my own design firm, something I dreamed about for years but never felt brave enough to do. The trust fund gave me the runway I needed, but the clients came because of the work I'd put in. The years of freelancing, of building a portfolio no one in my family ever cared to look at, finally paid off. I also met someone. Her name's Lila. She's quiet like me, thoughtful. We met at a local gallery where I'd been showcasing some client work. She asked me a question about typography, and we talked for 3 hours after. She doesn't know the full family story yet. I've told her bits and pieces, but she knows enough to understand that sometimes silence is safer than explanation. Every so often, I still get a text from Dylan. Usually vague, sometimes condescending, sometimes oddly friendly. Last one just said, "Hope you're enjoying Grandma's house. Weird you didn't invite us up yet, lol." I didn't reply. Some chapters don't need a sequel. Some doors, once closed, are better left that way. A few weeks ago, I found myself back at the lake house alone, walking the shoreline at sunset. I sat on the edge of the dock, the same spot where I first read Grandma's letter. The water was calm. The air smelled like pine and possibility. I took out the red box again. It was empty now, but I still kept it. Not because of what it once held, but because of what it represented. A lifeline. A quiet promise from someone who saw my worth when no one else did. I looked out at the lake and whispered, "Thank you." And I meant it. For everything. For the pain, for the strength it gave me, and for the reminder that sometimes the best revenge is peace. True, lasting peace. I don't know what the future holds with my family. Maybe one day there will be forgiveness. Maybe not. But I've stopped waiting for them to grow into the people I needed. Because I became the person I needed. And that's more than enough. My name's James, I'm 28, and for most of my adult life, I've been the quiet one in the family. The one people overlook when they talk about success. At gatherings, I'm the guy who ends up at the far end of the table, quietly eating while my cousins and uncles trade stories about their latest promotions, business ventures, or expensive vacations. I've learned to let it slide, mostly because I hate confrontation and I know where my real priorities lie. But there's only so much a person can take before the cracks start to show. I work in community development for our city, a job I'm deeply passionate about, but one that's not exactly glamorous by my family's standards. My role involves long hours, endless planning meetings, and working with nonprofits to revitalize struggling neighborhoods. I love it, not because it makes me rich, it doesn't, but because I see the tangible change it brings. The thing is, unless you can attach a flashy salary or a luxury car to your name, my family sees you as a cautionary tale rather than a success story. And my cousin Derek, in particular, has made it his personal mission to remind me of that at every opportunity. Derek is 32, works in finance, and likes to tell anyone who will listen how much he made in his last quarterly bonus. He has a knack for making jokes that land like little stabs, subtle enough to be brushed off as harmless teasing, but just sharp enough to stick with you. Over the years, I've gotten used to it. James probably gets paid in gift cards. He once laughed after I mentioned a work event. Another time, when I brought a homemade dish to Thanksgiving, he smirked and said, "Saving money wherever you can, huh?" The room always chuckled, and I always swallowed my pride. Last month, we had a big family dinner at my aunt's house. It was one of those evenings where the dining table was groaning under the weight of food. The air smelled like roasted turkey and garlic bread, and people's voices overlapped in that chaotic, familiar way. I sat halfway down the table, next to my younger cousin Leah, who's one of the few family members I actually feel comfortable around. We were chatting about her college classes when Derek, seated directly across from me, suddenly leaned back in his chair, grinning. "So, James," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Still doing that? What do you call it? Neighborhood babysitting." His tone dripped with fake innocence, but I could feel the eyes turn toward me. I forced a smile. Community development, actually. Working on the Eastview project right now. Ah, right, he said, nodding slowly like he was trying to remember something unimportant. Then, without missing a beat, he added, bet that pays about as much as flipping burgers. What is it now? Minimum wage. The table erupted in scattered chuckles. My uncle shook his head with an amused grin. My mom gave me a small, apologetic smile, and Leah looked horrified. I felt my face grow warm, but years of practice had taught me how to mask the sting. I just gave a short laugh and focused on my plate, telling myself it wasn't worth it. But then, as if on cue, my aunt's husband walked into the dining room carrying a tray of drinks. Behind him, the living room TV was on, volume low but screen bright. Someone must have left the news running after the earlier football game, just as Derek leaned over to make another comment. Something about, maybe one day James will get a real job. The anchor's voice cut through the room. And in recognition of his outstanding contributions to the city's redevelopment and housing initiatives, James Carter was presented with the Mayor's Award for Civic Leadership earlier today. There I was, on the screen, shaking hands with the mayor, a medal hanging around my neck, cameras flashing. I hadn't told my family about the ceremony, partly because I didn't want to deal with the half-hearted congratulations, partly because I didn't think they'd care. But now, the room went oddly quiet, forks suspended midair as everyone stared at the TV. I caught Derek's face in that moment, the smirk faltering, his jaw tightening ever so slightly. The silence stretched just long enough to feel heavy, and for the first time all evening, no one had a quick joke. And that was the exact second I decided things were going to change. I didn't know exactly how yet, but that night planted the seed, the realization that maybe, just maybe, I'd been letting them get away with underestimating me for far too long. The silence that hung over the table after the news clip didn't last long. My aunt, clearly uncomfortable, clapped her hands together and forced a laugh. Well, isn't that something? Anyway, who's ready for dessert? Conversations quickly shifted back to football scores and vacation plans, as if the moment hadn't even happened. I sat there, smiling faintly, but inside I could feel something churning. Not anger exactly, but a cold, sharp awareness that nothing I achieved would ever matter to most of them. Derek recovered faster than anyone. Within minutes, he was telling a story about closing some big deal at work, leaning back in his chair like a king holding court. People listened, asked questions, and showered him with the kind of admiration I knew I'd never get from them, no matter how many plaques or medals I collected. Every time I glanced around the table, I noticed the difference in tone. When Derek spoke, it was interest and praise. When I spoke, it was polite nods, followed by someone steering the conversation elsewhere. It's been this way for as long as I can remember. Growing up, Derek was the golden boy. He got the bigger Christmas gifts, the louder applause at school plays, the seat at the adult table years before I did. My own milestones were treated as smaller, almost accidental victories, like they happened in spite of me rather than because of me. When I made the honor roll in high school, my parents congratulated me, but my aunt followed it up with, well, it's easier when you're taking easier classes. Derek's lower grades were brushed off with. He's just got too much on his plate. That favoritism never faded. Even now, Derek could insult me in front of the whole family, and it would get brushed aside as harmless teasing. If I so much as teased him back, I'd get the James, don't be mean treatment. It was a one-way street where he got to play the charismatic joker, and I was expected to take the punchlines with a smile. Later that evening, after dinner, we all moved into the living room for coffee and dessert. Derek was already sprawled out on the couch, holding court again, telling a funny story about a time in college when I supposedly got lost trying to find a lecture hall. The story wasn't even true, but he embellished it with such flair that everyone laughed. My mom chuckled along, not because she believed it, but because going against the current in this family is like swimming into a riptide. I caught my dad's eye at one point, hoping maybe he'd step in, but he just looked away, sipping his coffee. It wasn't malice, more like a silent agreement that this is just how things are. And that, in some ways, hurt more than the comments themselves. Things escalated when the conversation drifted to the upcoming family trip to Lakewood Lodge. Every year, they rent out this big cabin in the mountains for a weekend. Group hikes, big dinners, late-night bonfires. It's supposed to be a family tradition, but somehow I've never been fully included. Oh, I get the invite, usually last minute, when most of the rooms are already claimed. I've slept on air mattresses in laundry rooms more times than I can count. This year was no different. As they started talking about the trip, Derek said, "We've already got the rooms sorted. James, I think there's still a spot in the basement if you bring your own cot." He grinned like he'd just offered me the deal of the century. The others chuckled softly, but I noticed Leah, bless her, glance at me with that same horrified expression she'd worn at dinner. "Why can't he take one of the spare bedrooms?" she asked. Derek shrugged. "Well, we already gave those out. You know, couples first, then kids, then extras." Extras. The word landed like a stone in my stomach. I didn't say anything. Not yet. But in my head, I was replaying that news clip from earlier, the way the room froze, the way Derek's smirk slipped. I thought about how they saw me, how they had always seen me, and realized this wasn't about a room or a joke. It was about the fact that in their minds, I didn't belong at the top tier of this family. I excused myself early that night, claiming I had an early meeting. On the drive home, the quiet hum of my car gave me space to think. I wasn't boiling over with rage. It was something calmer, colder. I'd been giving them the benefit of the doubt for years, and in return, they'd given me scraps of respect, if that. The award from the mayor had been a proud moment for me, but it had also exposed something, not to them, but to me. They didn't know the extent of what I'd been working on, the people I'd connected with, the doors that had opened in the past year. And I realized, for the first time, that I didn't have to keep those doors open for them. That trip to Lakewood Lodge, it was only a month away. And in that month, I started to see a very different path forward, one where I didn't just let them sideline me again. And then, a week later, Derek made a mistake, one that he didn't realize would change everything. A week after that dinner, I was in my office going over the final details for a new community center we were breaking ground on. It was one of the biggest projects I'd ever been involved in, years in the making, funded by a mix of city grants and private donations. I'd been pouring my energy into it for months, even sacrificing weekends to meet deadlines. It wasn't just a job to me. It was something that was going to change lives. That afternoon, I got a text from Leah. "Hey, have you seen the Lakewood Lodge group chat?" I frowned. I wasn't in any group chat for the trip. That wasn't unusual. They usually made a main group for planning that mysteriously didn't include me, and then someone would later forward me whatever scraps of info I needed to know. Still, something about Leah's tone made me uneasy. Before I could ask, she sent a screenshot. My name was right there in the conversation, or rather, the absence of it was. Derek had posted a message that read, "We should just tell James there's no room at the lodge this year. He's better off staying home." The basement was a joke anyway. Several family members had responded with laughing emojis. My aunt wrote, "It's probably for the best. He's always so awkward around the campfire." Then Derek followed up with, "Plus, with all that minimum wage stuff, I doubt he can even chip in for the food. Let's just split it among the rest of us." I read the words 3 times, the glow of my phone screen making the office feel suddenly colder. This wasn't just a thoughtless joke or a casual jab over dinner. This was deliberate. They had planned to exclude me entirely, to not even give me the courtesy of pretending I was welcome. What twisted the knife deeper was the knowledge that the Lakewood trip had been one of the few traditions I still clung to, even in its lopsided, air mattress in the laundry room form. It was the one time of year I could pretend, at least for a weekend, that I was part of something bigger than myself. And here they were, laughing about cutting me out altogether. Leah's message followed. "I'm so sorry. I didn't say anything in there because I didn't want them to know I sent you this, but I thought you should see it." I sat there for a long moment, staring at my phone, my coffee cooling untouched on the desk. The usual script in my head, "Let it go. It's not worth it. Stay out of trouble," wasn't running this time. Instead, there was just this quiet, steady voice. Enough. By the time I left the office that evening, the betrayal had settled into something sharper. My mind kept replaying every little slight over the years. Every time I'd been told I was overreacting. Every time I'd been talked over, laughed at, or made the butt of a joke. I thought about Derek's smirk, about the smug certainty that he'd always get away with it. And now, I had proof, written words, screenshotted and timestamped. But it wasn't just about catching them in the act. Something had shifted. That TV moment at dinner had shown me I had more influence and connections than they realized. This was my reason to use them. The next day, I didn't go to work right away. Instead, I took a detour, a meeting I knew could change the entire dynamic. I walked into City Hall with a plan forming in my head, one that had nothing to do with the Lakewood trip itself, and everything to do with making sure Derek and the rest of them learned exactly what it felt like to be on the outside looking in. Because if they thought the award from the mayor was the peak of what I could do, they hadn't seen anything yet. The days after Leah sent me that screenshot were some of the loneliest I'd felt in years. It wasn't just the words in that group chat. It was the realization that this wasn't an isolated act. It was the culmination of years of being quietly pushed to the fringes, treated like an afterthought at best and a punchline at worst. At work, I kept my usual calm demeanor, attending meetings and reviewing blueprints for the new community center. But the moment I'd get home, the silence hit like a weight. My phone would buzz with notifications, family messages about unrelated things, photos of Derek and the others grabbing drinks together, and I'd ignore them all. The Lakewood Lodge trip was coming up fast, and I wasn't invited. There wasn't even the usual last-minute, half-hearted, "Oh, we forgot to tell you, bring a cot," text. This year, they'd made sure I was gone completely. One night, I sat in my living room with the TV off, just staring at my award from the mayor on the shelf. It should have been a proud reminder of what I'd accomplished, but instead, it looked like some sort of cruel joke. Here I was, being recognized by city officials for making my community stronger, while my own family, the people who were supposed to know me best, couldn't be bothered to treat me with an ounce of respect. Leah called a couple of times, her voice soft and apologetic. "I wish I could do more, James. I don't even know why they're like this with you. It's like they've decided on some version of you that's not even real, and they won't let it go." I told her not to worry about it, but the truth was, her words stuck with me. She was right. They had built this image of me years ago and clung to it no matter what I did. In their minds, I was still that quiet kid who didn't have much going for him, and nothing I accomplished was going to rewrite that narrative, unless I rewrote it myself. But knowing that didn't make the days any easier. The week of the trip arrived, and my social media feed lit up with photos. Derek on the cabin porch with a beer in hand, my aunt posing by the lake, my uncle manning the grill. They didn't even try to hide it from me. In fact, I had the sinking suspicion they wanted me to see it, to know I was missing out. That Friday night, I sat on my balcony with a mug of coffee, watching the city lights and listening to the faint hum of traffic below. It was almost peaceful, but there was a heaviness in my chest I couldn't shake. This was supposed to be family weekend. Instead, I was eating reheated leftovers while they toasted marshmallows without me. For a brief moment, I wondered if it was even worth it to keep trying. If maybe the healthier thing would be to just walk away, cut them off, build my own circle from the people who actually respected me. I could do it. I had colleagues who valued my input, friends who'd shown up for me more than my own relatives ever had. But then, like a slow spark catching, another thought formed. Walking away would give them exactly what they wanted, for me to disappear quietly, making it easier for them to pretend I'd never been part of the picture. No, if I was going to go, it wouldn't be quietly. I didn't have the whole plan yet, but I had the first pieces. My connections from the awards ceremony, the projects I was working on, the influence I hadn't flexed in front of them before, it was all there, waiting. And as much as it hurt to sit there alone that night, that same loneliness was also solidifying into resolve. I wasn't just going to take back my seat at the table. I was going to decide who got to sit at it in the first place. And I knew exactly where to start. The week after the Lakewood Lodge trip, I threw myself into work like never before. Not out of desperation, but out of focus. Every slight, every laugh at my expense, every extra or minimum wage jab was fuel. The more I poured into my projects, the more opportunities seemed to open up. Our Eastview revitalization project was nearing the final approval stage, and I was spearheading the push for a community grant that could double its budget. It was the kind of move that could turn a modest improvement into something transformative, and I wasn't just a small piece of it. I was the face of the effort. I met with donors, negotiated terms, and pitched to city officials with a confidence I hadn't realized I was capable of until now. It didn't take long for people to notice. Within a month, my name was popping up in local news articles again, not just in passing, but in headlines. Eastview Project gains momentum under Carter's leadership. Invitations started rolling in, speaking engagements, networking dinners, even a spot on a nonprofit's board. Each event added to my reach and my credibility. And yet, I kept most of it off social media, not because I was hiding it, but because I wanted control over when and how my family found out. I wanted the reveal to hit at the right moment, the way that award on TV had frozen them mid-bite. The shift in my personal life was just as noticeable. I upgraded my small, aging sedan for a clean, understated SUV, nothing flashy, but respectable. My apartment, which had always been comfortable, got a quiet facelift. New furniture, framed photographs from projects I'd worked on, even a small home office. The space felt like mine in a way it hadn't before. I also started saying yes to things I'd been turning down for years: charity galas, mixers, leadership workshops. I made a point to meet people who could connect me with opportunities outside my usual circles. The more I invested in myself, the clearer it became that I had been playing small for far too long. It wasn't just about success, it was about control. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for my family to acknowledge my worth. I was building something so undeniable that their approval wouldn't even matter. And the more I built, the more I realized I could use it, not just to elevate myself, but to reshape the dynamics entirely. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. An email from the city's cultural committee landed in my inbox, inviting me to chair a high-profile fundraising gala for urban renewal. It would be attended by major donors, city leaders, and as luck would have it, my aunt's best friend, who loved to brag to my family about her social calendar. I could already imagine the whispers spreading through the grapevine. James is chairing the gala, with the mayor in attendance? But the real turning point came when I learned where the gala would be held. Lakewood Lodge, the same place they had just excluded me from. Only now, I had the authority to shape the guest list. It was almost too perfect. When I first saw Lakewood Lodge in the event details, I thought it had to be a mistake. But no, the cultural committee had specifically chosen it for its scenic location and reputation as the crown jewel of the area. The same rustic meets luxury venue my family had treated like their private kingdom every year was about to host the biggest professional event of my career. As the appointed chair for the gala, I wasn't just a figurehead. I had real influence over every detail: the theme, the sponsors, the press coverage, and most importantly, the guest list. The committee provided a base list of donors and dignitaries, but I was given the freedom to send personal invitations to anyone I thought could add to the atmosphere. The power of that pen in my hand was intoxicating. I could invite anyone. I could leave anyone out. And, just as importantly, I could control how someone was invited: front row prominence or quietly pushed to the sidelines. It got better. The lodge's manager, a warm, meticulous woman named Clara, reached out to me personally to coordinate logistics. I'd met her years ago during a small community event I helped organize, and she remembered me instantly. "You're the one who made sure our vendors got paid when the old budget fell apart," she said over the phone. That meant a lot to us. This event, whatever you need, just say the word. That kind of loyalty was invaluable. It meant I could reserve spaces, shift seating charts, and manage access to certain areas without raising eyebrows. I started gathering information quietly. Through casual conversations, I confirmed that my family was already planning their next Lakewood trip 3 months after the gala. They didn't know the venue was hosting my event first. Derek, according to Leah, had even joked about finally getting the good cabin room without James taking up space in the basement. It was almost laughable how blind they were to the fact that the ground was shifting under their feet. I played it cool with Leah, never revealing the full extent of my role in the gala. But I asked her, as naturally as I could, if she thought Derek or my aunt's friend would be interested in community events like this. She snorted. "Derek? Please. He only shows up to places where he can talk about himself. But Aunt Claire's friend? Yeah, she'd be there in a heartbeat, if only to brag about rubbing elbows with the mayor." Perfect. That was the crack in the door. I arranged for a discreet, beautifully designed save-the-date card to be sent to Aunt Claire's friend. I knew she'd talk, and I knew my family would hear about it from her before they ever heard it from me. Sure enough, a week later, Leah texted, "They're buzzing about it. Derek's pretending he doesn't care, but you should have seen his face when Aunt Claire mentioned the mayor." Meanwhile, I doubled down on making the gala unforgettable. I secured a string quartet for the reception, coordinated a silent auction with high-value items, and locked in a speech from the mayor himself. Every detail was deliberate, a mix of class and visibility that no one could dismiss as minimum wage work. And behind all the formalities, I began shaping a seating chart with surgical precision. People who had supported me in my work, donors, volunteers, colleagues, would be placed front and center. People who had dismissed or undermined me, well, if they got in at all, it wouldn't be anywhere near the spotlight. By the time the final guest list was ready, I was holding something far more than a roster of names. I was holding the blueprint for a night they wouldn't forget, one that would tilt the balance of power in my favor without me raising my voice once. And when Clara emailed me a detail about the lodge's private VIP suites, the ones with the lake views and the private fire pits, the plan for exactly how this was going to play out crystallized in my mind. The night of the gala arrived crisp and cool, the kind of early autumn evening where the air feels charged with possibility. Lakewood Lodge had been transformed. Strings of warm lights draped along the wooden beams, the glow of the fireplace spilling across the main hall, the scent of cedar and fresh herbs drifting in from the kitchen. Guests in evening were mingled near the silent auction tables, champagne glasses in hand, while the string quartet played softly in the background. From my position near the entrance, I could see everything. Every handshake, every glance, every subtle shift in posture as people realized who was important in the room and who was not. I was the one in the tailored charcoal suit, greeting city leaders like old friends, my name announced alongside the mayors in the program. I didn't invite my whole family. That would have made the statement too broad, too impersonal. Instead, I'd chosen my targets with care. Aunt Claire's friend got a prime invitation, complete with her name printed elegantly on a front table card. I knew she wouldn't come alone. She thrived on being the gatekeeper to exclusive events. True to form, she brought Derek, along with two other relatives who rarely passed up a chance to bask in social clout. The moment they walked in, I caught Derek's eyes sweeping the room. He'd dressed well, navy suit, designer watch prominently displayed, but I could see the faint tension in his jaw. This wasn't his kind of crowd. Here, people didn't care about quarterly bonuses or who had the latest sports car. They cared about influence, projects, legacies. And in this space, I wasn't the cousin with the minimum wage job. I was the chair of the entire evening. I welcomed them with polite warmth, shaking Derek's hand like we were old acquaintances. "Glad you could make it," I said, gesturing toward the seating chart on the stand by the entrance. "You're at table 12. His eyes flicked to the chart. Table 12 was near the back, close enough to see the stage, but far from the inner circle of donors and officials. He opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again when Aunt Claire's friend bustled past me, gushing about how glorious the lodge looked tonight. As the evening unfolded, I moved easily through the crowd, making introductions, thanking donors, stepping onto the stage to give a brief speech that drew warm applause. When the mayor joined me for the closing remarks, he clasped my shoulder and said into the microphone, "We're grateful for leaders like James Carter who dedicate their time and vision to making our city stronger." Cameras flashed. I caught Derek in my peripheral vision, watching, his expression unreadable. But the best part hadn't even happened yet. After the speeches, Clara quietly approached me. "The VIP suites are ready for the after reception," she murmured. "We'd reserved them for top-tier donors and key partners. Private spaces with sweeping lake views, plush seating, and trays of fine desserts brought in by staff. Only a select list had access. As people began drifting toward the elevators that led to the suites, I made a point to escort certain guests personally. My colleagues, the mayor, a couple of donors who'd written 5-figure checks, all led upstairs to the warmth and privacy of the VIP rooms. Derek and the others? They stayed downstairs, the hum of laughter and clinking glasses above them just out of reach. From the balcony outside the suite, I could see them in the main hall, lingering by the emptying dessert tables, their small talk flattening as more and more people disappeared upstairs. They didn't know the details, but they knew enough to realize they weren't part of it. I didn't have to gloat. I didn't have to say a word. The message was already written in the architecture of the night. Here, in this space, in front of these people, I was the one who decided where everyone stood. And as the night wound down, I knew this was only the first ripple of what was coming. By the end of the gala, the shift in the room was undeniable. The after-reception in the VIP suites had cemented alliances, opened doors for future projects, and, more importantly, shown everyone present exactly who held influence that night. By the time guests began leaving, I'd secured pledges that would take the Eastview project beyond its original scope, an expansion into 2 additional neighborhoods. When I finally came back down to the main hall, most of the remaining guests had already filtered out. Derek and the others were lingering by the coat check, trying to look unbothered. Aunt Claire's friend was fussing with her scarf, talking too loudly about how lovely the main hall had been, though her darting eyes told me she was desperate to know what had gone on upstairs. Derek caught my eye, and for the first time in years, he didn't have a smirk ready. His tone was clipped, careful. "Nice event," he said. "Didn't realize you ran the whole thing." "Yeah," I replied evenly. "A lot of moving parts. But when you're in the right position, you get to decide how it all comes together." I let the words hang there. Not a threat, just a truth, plain and sharp. On the drive home, Leah called. She'd been there, quietly taking it all in from one of the closer tables. "You know," she said, "I think they finally saw it tonight. Not just what you do, but where you stand now." Derek looked like he'd swallowed a lemon. I laughed, not in triumph, but in relief. It wasn't about humiliating them. It was about reclaiming the space they'd spent years trying to shove me out of. And now that I had it, I wasn't giving it back. Word of the gala traveled fast through the family grapevine. By the time the next Lakewood Lodge trip rolled around, the tone had shifted. Instead of the usual last-minute scraps of information, I got a call from Aunt Claire herself, suddenly warm, telling me they'd love for me to join and take a prime upstairs room. I thanked her politely and declined. "I've got other commitments," I said simply. And I did. Bigger ones. Better ones. As I hung up, I realized something. They'd finally offered me a seat at their table, but I had built a bigger one of my own. And the best part? I got to choose who sat there. That was the moment I knew I was done being their extra. I was the host now. Hey Reddit, I never thought I'd be the type to post on here, but here we are. Before I get into the absolute circus my brother pulled, I need to give you some context. My name's Jake, I'm 34, and I've spent my entire life dealing with my family's nonsense. See, I was never the favorite. That title has always belonged to my older brother, Ethan. Ethan could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. He got praised for every little thing. When he got average grades, they acted like he was the next Einstein. When he got his first job at some dead-end sales gig, they called him a business genius. Meanwhile, I could be acing my classes or landing scholarships, and all I'd get was a half-hearted, "That's nice, Jake." But did you hear Ethan got a promotion? No, don't get me wrong. I'm not bitter that my brother got attention. What bothers me is how he milked it for all it was worth. He figured out early that as long as he kept up the illusion of being successful, my parents would bend over backward to make sure he never struggled. And struggle, he did, just not in ways you'd expect. Ethan was never the hardworking type. He always had big ideas, but never followed through on any of them. He'd start a business and then let it crash. He'd move to a new city for an amazing opportunity and come back broke 6 months later. Every single time, my parents bailed him out. If I ever needed help, crickets. Luckily, I didn't need it. I worked my ass off, built a successful career, and now I'm in a really comfortable financial position. But you know what happens when you come from an entitled family and you finally make it? They start seeing you as their personal ATM. At first, it was small things. Mom and Dad would say, "Oh, Jake, since you're doing so well, could you help Ethan with rent this month?" Or Ethan would call me and drop hints like, "Man, I just need a little boost to get back on my feet." It's nothing to you, right? I shut that down fast. I have zero problem helping people who actually need it, but I refuse to fund Ethan's lifestyle. Every time I said no, they made me out to be the villain. "You're so selfish, Jake. Ethan's your brother. Don't you want him to succeed? You have more than enough money. What's a few thousand to you?" So I started distancing myself. I still saw them on holidays, but I stopped answering every call. I stopped engaging when they tried to guilt trip me. And for a while, things were quiet. Ethan still played the golden child, and I kept to myself. But then he did something so insane, so utterly ridiculous, that I actually thought he was joking at first. And that's where the real story begins. A few months ago, out of nowhere, my parents called me. Not a text, not a guilt-trippy voicemail, an actual call, which was rare. I answered, thinking something might be wrong, but instead, my mom sounded giddy. "Jake, you won't believe it. Your brother just did something amazing." Now, I've heard this script before. Ethan probably got a new job, or maybe he found an investor dumb enough to throw money at one of his failed business ideas. Either way, I knew exactly how this conversation would go. They'd hype him up, wait for me to say something supportive, and then eventually slip in a request for money. So I played along. Oh, what did he do? He bought us a house. My mom practically squealed. A beautiful, brand new house in a gated community. He surprised us with the keys today. I'll be honest, this caught me off guard. Ethan, buying a house. This guy never had more than a few $100 in his bank account at any given time. In a gated community? That wasn't just any house. That was expensive. I was skeptical but kept my voice neutral. Wow, that's generous of him. I know, my dad jumped in. It just goes to show how responsible he's become. He's finally settling down, thinking about his future. And he did it all for us. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. Ethan was about as responsible as a raccoon in a convenience store. There was no way he suddenly had his life together. Something wasn't adding up. That's great, I said, trying to keep the conversation short. So what's the catch? My parents went silent for a split second, just long enough to confirm my suspicion. What do you mean, Jake? There's no catch. Your brother worked so hard to make this happen. Uh-huh. Sure. I didn't press further. Instead, I gave them my usual polite but disengaged response and got off the phone as soon as possible. I knew something was fishy, and sure enough, it didn't take long for the truth to come out. A few days later, Ethan called me. Not a text, not a casual check-in, an actual phone call, which he only ever did when he wanted something. Hey bro, how's it going? He started, his voice way too cheerful. What do you want, Ethan? I cut straight to the chase. What? Can't a guy just call his little brother to chat? I let the silence drag on. After a few seconds, he sighed dramatically. Okay, fine. I do need a little favor. But it's nothing major. Just a tiny thing. Barely anything, really. Spit it out. So, you know that house I got from Mom and Dad? Yeah. Well, the bank kinda needs the first payment soon, and I was thinking. I hung up. I didn't even say a word. Just hung up. Within minutes, he called back. I ignored it. Then a text. Ethan. Dude. My call dropped. Weird timing, LOL. Anyway, as I was saying, I just need a little help this month. I left it on read. 2 minutes later, another text. Ethan, come on, man, you're rich. It's not even a big deal for you. And there it was. The expectation. The entitlement. Ethan, once again, assuming my success meant I owed him something. I finally replied. You bought a house you can't afford and expected me to cover it. Ethan replied. Dude, it's not like that. I totally have it under control. I just need a little boost this month. After that, I'll be fine. Right. Because Ethan's totally known for his financial responsibility. I replied, not my problem. That should have been the end of it. But Ethan, he wasn't giving up that easily. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls from Mom and a long, guilt-ridden text. Mom texted, Jake, I don't understand why you're being so cold to your brother. He did something amazing for this family, and now he just needs a little support. You make more money than all of us combined. Are you really going to let your own brother struggle? Oh, so he went crying to Mommy. Classic. Then, another text from Ethan. Bro, just think about it. It's for Mom and Dad. You want them to lose their house. And there it was. The manipulation. I was done playing games. Ethan was trying to guilt me into financing a luxury house so he could keep up his golden child act. The house was in his name, his responsibility. Yet he somehow thought I'd step in and save the day. Not happening. I decided it was time to dig a little deeper. So I did something Ethan never expected. I called the bank. I won't spoil what I found out just yet, but let's just say, Ethan was in way deeper than he was letting on. And when I confronted him about it, that's when the real chaos started. I called the bank the next day, early in the morning before Ethan had a chance to try anything else. I didn't even tell him what I was doing. I wanted to know everything without him getting a chance to cover his tracks. I gave them the house's address, explained who I was, and asked if I could get some details about the payments for the property. The person on the other end was nice enough, but when I asked for specifics, I could tell something was off. Well, we can't provide specific account details, sir, due to privacy policies. I'm not asking for his account number, I interrupted, cutting her off before she could go into the spiel. I just need to know the payment schedule and if there are any issues with payments. There was a pause. Well, I can confirm the first payment is due next week, and it's a significant amount, sir. The loan was processed with a sizable interest rate and required a hefty down payment, which Ethan handled. However, there are some concerns about the second payment. I felt my heart drop. This wasn't just a simple loan. This was a bad idea dressed up like success. What kind of concerns? I asked, my voice tight. Well, I'm afraid there's an issue with the credit history he submitted for the loan. It doesn't seem to match the usual criteria for this type of property, and as a result, we've sent him multiple reminders regarding his upcoming payment. I sat back in my chair, running my hand over my face. So Ethan had gotten the house, but now he was completely in over his head. He was in too deep, and he hadn't told my parents a thing. The worst part? He probably never planned on paying it off by himself. That's where I came in. I thanked the woman for her help, hung up, and sat in silence for a few minutes. I wasn't going to let him manipulate me into saving him this time. This wasn't about family loyalty or a brotherly bond anymore. It was about him treating me like his personal bank, and I wasn't going to stand for it. I wasn't sure how I'd confront him, but one thing was clear. I wasn't going to pay a dime. The next few days were tense. Ethan called a few times, but I ignored him. Then my parents started texting me. Jake, please, Ethan is just trying to do the right thing by the family. You know how much Mom and Dad would appreciate you helping him out. That one came from Dad. A few hours later, my mom texted too. Jake, you're making this so much harder than it has to be. Ethan worked so hard to get this house. Why can't you help him just a little? It's not like you'll even notice the money gone. The frustration was building inside me, but I kept my cool. I knew exactly where this was headed. They were going to side with Ethan no matter what. I wasn't going to let them guilt-trip me into enabling his poor decisions. He had made this mess. It was his problem to fix. Finally, after days of texts and calls, Ethan managed to catch me on the phone. I knew this was coming. He was persistent, after all. Jake, he said, his voice dripping with that familiar charm. Come on, bro. I need you here. You're literally the only person who can help me out right now. You know this house means everything to Mom and Dad. They've been raving about it nonstop, and now they're going to lose it because of this stupid loan. I stayed silent for a long moment, just letting the silence stretch out. Ethan, I said slowly, you're asking me to bail you out. Again. There was a pause, then he sighed heavily, like I was the one being unreasonable. You don't understand, Jake. I'm doing this for the family. You know that, right? I'm trying to give them everything they've ever wanted, and now you're telling me you can't help. His voice was getting more desperate, but I wasn't buying it. I'd seen this act too many times before. You're not doing this for the family, Ethan. You're doing this for yourself. You bought that house so you could play the hero, so you could show Mom and Dad you're the successful one. But now that it's crashing down, you want me to clean up your mess. He was quiet for a moment. Then, almost in a whisper, he said, You don't even care about me, do you? I felt a pang of something deep in my chest. Maybe it was guilt, maybe just the familiarity of the manipulation. But I wasn't going to let him pull me back in. You've made that pretty clear over the years, haven't you? I replied coldly. You don't care about me, Ethan. You just care about what I can do for you. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I didn't think you'd be this guy, he finally muttered, his tone almost bitter. I guess I was wrong about you. Before I could respond, he hung up. I sat there, staring at my phone. I had finally reached my breaking point. The next morning, my parents called again. They weren't even trying to disguise their disappointment anymore. Jake, my dad started, his voice cold, you need to help your brother. This is your chance to show him you're there for him. He's not asking for much. Dad, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, he's asking for something that isn't mine to give. He made the decision to buy the house. He can figure out how to keep it. Jake, we're asking you to help, and you're refusing? After everything we've done for you. The guilt they were trying to throw at me was almost comical. They'd never once asked me to help with anything that wasn't for them. And that was the turning point. Ethan had crossed a line, and my parents weren't any better. They'd chosen him again. I knew right then that if they were going to keep treating me like this, I was done. But I had one last card to play. I wasn't just going to let this go. The next few days were intense, but I wasn't going to let myself get emotionally dragged back into their drama. I spent my time focusing on work and keeping my distance from Ethan and my parents. But every time I checked my phone, there was a new message from them. It was like they thought I could just ignore everything and magically make Ethan's problems disappear. But this time, something was different. My dad called me again, but I didn't pick up. Instead, I waited for the voicemail. He left a message, the sound of his voice filled with frustration and disappointment. Jake, he said, this isn't about the money. It's about family. Ethan needs you. You can't just abandon him like this. If you don't step up now, I don't know what we'll do. I thought you understood what it meant to take care of each other. Please, call me back. I just stared at the screen, the message echoing in my mind. Take care of each other. If that's what it meant to them, then I was done. They didn't need me to take care of them. They just needed me to solve their problems for them. A few hours later, I got a text from Ethan. It was short and to the point. If you don't help me, I'm going to lose everything. This house is going to ruin me, and you'll be the one who made that happen. Are you really going to let me go under? Do you want to be the one to watch me lose everything? The words stung. I wasn't going to lie. There was a part of me that felt something guilt, maybe. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this wasn't my mess to clean up. He'd made his choices. I'd been there for him in the past, and every time, I ended up paying the price. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I spent the next few hours sitting with the idea, weighing everything in my head. And then, it clicked. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I got a call from my parents. This time, I picked up. Jake, we need to talk, my mom said, her voice tense. Ethan's in trouble. You have to help him. You know he can't handle this on his own. Mom, Ethan's not a kid anymore. He's an adult. And he's made a choice that he can't back out of. It's not my responsibility to fix it for him. You're being so stubborn, she snapped. This is family, Jake. You can't just sit back and let him lose everything. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my cool. You keep saying it's about family, but all I see is you asking me to bail him out. You're just enabling him, Mom. He's not learning anything if I step in every time things go south. Her silence on the other end was almost deafening. Please, Jake, she finally whispered. This is the last time I'll ask you. We're begging you. That's when I decided to play my hand. I'll help, I said, making sure my voice was as calm and measured as possible. But it's going to be on my terms. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the hope rising in her voice. What do you mean? I'll help Ethan, I continued. But I'm not writing him a check. I'm not paying his bills. What I will do is help him find a way to get out of the situation. I'll cover the fees for him to sell the house and pay off the loan, but he needs to move out. And I'm going to make sure he understands that if he ever pulls something like this again, I'm done. There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. I could tell she was processing what I said. She clearly didn't like it, but I wasn't going to let them push me into a corner again. I wasn't going to let Ethan's poor decisions dictate my life. Finally, my mom spoke again, but her voice was trembling now. You're really going to make him do that? Yeah, I said. Because he's not going to learn anything if we keep enabling him. This isn't the way to handle things, and I'm not going to be part of it anymore. There was a long pause, and then she hung up. I thought that would be the end of it, but of course, Ethan wasn't going to let go that easily. A few hours later, I got another text from him. It was short, but the desperation in it was unmistakable. You're really doing this? You're going to make me lose everything? You're going to ruin my life over this? If you don't help me, you're not my brother anymore. I ignored his message. This wasn't my responsibility. A few days passed without hearing from anyone in my family. I thought maybe they'd finally accepted the decision I'd made. I was wrong. It all came to a head when my mom called me again. This time, there was no pretense, no niceties. She was furious, and her voice was tight with anger as she spoke. Jake, how could you do this to him? How could you stand by and watch him lose everything? Her words were sharp, each one cutting deeper than the last. I don't know what's gotten into you, but this isn't the son I raised. He's your brother. Don't you care about him? I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to shout at her, to tell her exactly why I was doing what I was doing, but I forced myself to stay calm. It wasn't the first time she'd reacted like this, and I had learned long ago that getting into a shouting match with her only made things worse. I do care about him, Mom, but caring about him doesn't mean I should throw away my own future to fix his mistakes. He's an adult. He needs to take responsibility for his life. I've been there for him over and over again, and I'm done. If he's not willing to learn from his mistakes, then that's on him. There was a long pause on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice was low, almost like she was trying to hold back tears. You're really going to let him fall, aren't you? After everything we've done for you? After everything we've given you? You're going to abandon us like this? I felt a bitter laugh bubble up in my throat, but I kept it inside. You've given me everything, Mom. You've given me a lifetime of enabling your son's bad decisions. You've taught me to pick up the pieces when he's too careless to do it himself. And you expect me to keep doing it? I'm done being the bank, Mom. I'm done. I could hear her take a shaky breath on the other end. We've always been a family, Jake. You're breaking it apart. Maybe it's already broken, I replied, the words coming out sharper than I intended. Maybe it's been broken for a long time, and I've just been too blind to see it. The call ended with silence, and I stared at my phone, wondering if that was it. If my decision had truly cut the last tie between me and my family. That evening, as I was winding down for the night, I got another message, this one from Ethan. It wasn't the usual angry text, but it had the same bitter tone. You know, you've really shown your true colors. I thought you were my brother. I guess I was wrong. You're just like them. You think you're better than me because you've got money. But when it comes down to it, you're just as selfish as they are. I don't need your help. I'll figure it out on my own. But don't ever call me again. I'm done with you. I stared at the text for a long time, letting it sink in. It stung, yes. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it was a blessing in disguise. Ethan wasn't asking for help anymore. He was pushing me away. And that was the final sign that I needed to let go. I didn't respond. I didn't have to. The next few days were quiet. No calls, no messages. For the first time in years, I felt like I could breathe without the constant weight of family expectations pressing down on me. But then, a few days later, my dad called again. I debated whether or not to pick up, but eventually, I answered. Jake, he said, and his voice was more resigned than angry this time. We need to talk. About what? I asked, trying to keep the edge out of my voice. I wasn't in the mood for another guilt trip. About everything, he said, sighing deeply. About Ethan. About the house. About how you've completely turned your back on us. Do you realize what you've done? I haven't turned my back on you, Dad. I've been watching you all enable Ethan for years. I've been watching him make mistake after mistake, and every time, you've come running to me to fix it. You've conditioned him to think he can do whatever he wants without consequences, and I'm done being the person who cleans up after him. He didn't respond for a moment, and I could feel the distance growing between us, like the words I was saying were building walls that I didn't know how to take down. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. We've done everything for you, Jake. We've always had your back. You've never had to struggle like Ethan. You've always been the one who was responsible. But you think that's enough, don't you? You think that because you've got money, you don't owe us anything anymore. I was quiet for a long time, and when I spoke, I could feel the finality in my words. I owe you nothing, Dad. Not when all you've ever done is make me feel like I'm responsible for fixing everyone else's problems. You raised me to be self-sufficient, but when it came time for me to stand up for myself, you all decided I wasn't family anymore. I can't keep doing this. I'm done. You need to figure it out. The line went silent again, and for the first time, I felt like I wasn't the one trying to fix everything. My dad's voice came back, soft but firm. I guess this is it, then. I don't know who you are anymore, Jake. I don't know how I'm supposed to look at you after this. And with that, the call ended. That was the last time I spoke to my dad. I took a deep breath and leaned back in my chair, staring at the phone screen. I knew that by cutting them off, I had severed the last remaining connection to my past. There was no going back now. I could feel the weight lifting off my shoulders, the sense of freedom washing over me. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I had given them chances, and they'd squandered every one of them. It was time for me to finally live my life, free from the constant pull of my family's expectations. I didn't need to keep fixing their mistakes. I had my own life to live now, and it was going to be on my terms. No more guilt. No more obligation. And as for Ethan, well, I didn't know what his future held, but it wasn't my problem anymore. He would have to figure it out on his own, just like I had to. I had made my choice. And for the first time in a long time, I felt peace. What do you think about this whole situation? Let me know in the comments. My name's Luca, I'm 27, and for most of my life, I've known how to keep my mouth shut at family dinners. When you grow up in a house like mine, with parents who treat love like a competition and siblings who know how to win it, you learn to swallow things whole. Praise, insults, disappointment, you take it in and chew in silence. That's what I did for most of my life. Until my 27th birthday dinner. It was a warm Sunday night, the kind that made the backyard twinkle under string lights and cheap wine. My mom insisted on hosting as always. She said birthdays should be family-centered, not flashy, which basically meant we were having overcooked pasta and store-brand soda in the same backyard where my sister Natalie got a $12,000 engagement party just 2 years earlier. But I didn't complain. I never do. I showed up on time, brought a bottle of wine I knew no one would drink, and offered to help set the table even though they always pretend not to hear me when I ask. The whole family was there. Mom, Dad, Natalie, of course, her fiancé Brandon, a human LinkedIn profile, Uncle Mark, Aunt Lisa, their 3 kids who always smelled faintly of glue, and Grandma, who hadn't remembered my name in about 4 years but still called me the quiet one. Everyone was loud, tipsy, and already talking over each other by the time we sat down. I was wedged between the cooler holding the drinks and the back of my cousin's folding chair. Natalie, meanwhile, had a seat right next to Dad, like always. Perfect posture, perfect teeth, perfect daughter. I was carving into the lasagna, dry, burnt edges, when Dad raised his glass. His voice boomed the way it always did when he was trying to sound sentimental. To the one child who actually made us proud. Everyone laughed. Of course they did. They knew who he meant. They always knew. He didn't say her name, but he looked right at her. Right at Natalie. Her cheeks flushed with the kind of modesty you only perform when you know everyone already loves you. Mom clinked her glass and added, "Some people peak at birth." Another round of laughter. Even Brandon let out this smug, breathy chuckle like he was trying not to gloat on her behalf. And me? I just stared at my plate. Not because it hurt. I was past the stage of being hurt by them. This had been the dynamic for years. Natalie the golden child. Me the extra. I stopped competing a long time ago. But something was different this time. Not just the words, but the way they rang out, loud and clear, as if I wasn't even in the room. As if the chair I was sitting in had already been emptied of anything they'd once hoped for. I reached for my glass, took a small sip, and let the silence grow just long enough. Then I said it. Funny, that's not what the DNA test says. It wasn't loud. I didn't shout. I just said it the way I'd say anything. Calm, even, like I was making an observation about the weather. But that was enough. Natalie froze mid-laugh. Her smile cracked in place. The room suddenly felt vacuum-sealed. Dad's fork hit the plate with a clink and stayed there. Brandon looked like someone had just told him his trust fund was audited. Aunt Lisa coughed into her napkin, probably out of reflex. Even Grandma looked up. I didn't look at any of them directly. I just took another bite of lasagna like I hadn't just dropped a live grenade on the table. You might wonder why I said that. Why I chose that moment. But the truth is, I didn't plan to. I didn't wake up that morning thinking tonight's the night I dropped the bomb. It had just built up. Years of little comments. Backhanded praise. Christmas gifts where Natalie got plane tickets to Italy and I got socks. Dad saying, "That's just how Luca is," every time I dared to express disappointment. Mom making sure everyone knew that Natalie was her miracle after years of trying, while I was just a surprise, but we loved him anyway. And yet I stayed. Called them every Sunday. Sent gifts. Paid for their car repairs. Helped Natalie with her taxes last year. Not that she thanked me. I did it all because I thought maybe if I stayed useful, I'd be seen. But when I found the test, tucked behind old files in Dad's desk while I was helping him digitize documents last month, everything shifted. It wasn't labeled. Just a name, Natalie Harper Mitchell, paternal confirmation. I don't know what I expected. I opened it mostly out of boredom. But the second I saw the word inconclusive, followed by a note about non-paternity, I sat down on the floor like my knees stopped working. My father, the man who had turned her into his pride, his golden child, his favorite, wasn't her biological father. I didn't confront anyone. Not right away. I scanned it, saved it, let it sit in the dark corner of my computer folder like a secret I didn't know what to do with. I told myself it wasn't my business. That bringing it up would just cause drama. That maybe they had a reason for hiding it. But the way they laughed that night, the way they made sure, again, that I knew my place in their little hierarchy, something snapped. After I spoke, the silence stretched into something thick and awkward. It wrapped itself around the table and squeezed. I watched Natalie swallow hard and try to speak, but nothing came out. Dad's face turned the color of the wine he refused to drink. Mom looked at me like I'd kicked a dog. What are you talking about?" she asked finally, voice shaking. "That's not funny, Luca." "I wasn't joking," I said, still calm. "But maybe now's not the time. We should enjoy dinner, right? It's my birthday, after all." That was the last thing I said for the rest of the night. I let the silence do the talking. The rest of the dinner moved in slow motion. People ate, but no one spoke. Natalie kept looking at Dad, and he wouldn't meet her eyes. Mom just kept fiddling with her fork, her lip trembling in a way that told me she already knew, or at least suspected. After cake, which I didn't eat, I got up, thanked everyone for coming, and left before presents were even opened. I didn't take anything with me except my phone and keys. That was 3 days ago. Since then, I've had 3 missed calls from Mom. One from Natalie. Nothing from Dad. But I'm not finished yet. Because the test? That wasn't the only thing I found. And if they think a single line at dinner was the end of the story, they're not ready for what's coming next. The morning after the dinner, I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating relentlessly on the nightstand. Missed calls, texts, voicemails, most of them from Mom and Natalie. One from Aunt Lisa that just said, "What did you do?" I didn't answer any of them. Not yet. Instead, I made coffee, sat by the window, and opened the folder again. The DNA test was just the beginning. While scanning Dad's filing cabinet last month, I was organizing decades worth of documents, tax returns, property titles, old insurance forms. But at the very bottom of the drawer, hidden beneath an envelope labeled "Shred Later, Classic," I found a small accordion file marked in Dad's blocky handwriting. Personal, do not touch. I touched. Inside were a dozen pieces of paper. Some were old hospital bills. Some were letters. One was a notarized document, a confidentiality agreement. Another was a single-page court record that had no business being in our home. It took me a few hours to piece it together. The test, the letters, the dates. But once I did, everything about our family made a lot more sense. Natalie wasn't just Dad's stepchild. She was the result of an affair. The dates lined up. The letters were from a man named Gregory Mitchell, her biological father, who, based on the address on one of the envelopes, lived just 2 towns over. Apparently, he'd been in contact with Mom for a few years after Natalie was born, then agreed to terminate parental rights once Dad signed the adoption papers, a process that had clearly never been disclosed to anyone outside their little circle. There was a clause in the agreement stating the entire matter would be sealed for the sake of the family's emotional well-being. But here's the part that really stuck with me. In one letter, dated only 6 months after I was born, Gregory had written, "You've made your choice, and I'll respect it. I just hope Luca doesn't grow up feeling like a stranger in his own home." That line hit like a punch to the gut, because that's exactly what I had felt my entire life. Like a stranger. When I first found the file, I didn't know what to do with it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even shocked. Just numb. It explained too much. It explained why Dad always kept Natalie close, like she might slip away. Why he pushed me away every time I tried to connect. Not cruelly, but with that quiet coldness people use when they think they're hiding something. It explained why Mom was always walking on eggshells when the two of them argued. Why I was the afterthought, the accident, the reminder. For weeks, I said nothing. Then came the birthday dinner. Now they had forced my hand. By the second day after the dinner, Mom was practically begging in texts. "Please talk to me. We didn't mean it like that. You misunderstood your father." I didn't reply. I just opened my laptop and started typing. I drafted an email. No dramatics. No rants. Just screenshots. A PDF of the DNA report. A scan of the letter from Gregory. The adoption records. The confidentiality agreement. And at the bottom, a single line. "I deserve to know the truth before you built a family on lies and left me outside the walls. If you want to talk, I'm done whispering." I didn't send it. Not yet. I waited until that evening, when I knew they'd all be together. My family had a tradition, Sunday night dinners, every week without fail. Even if someone was sick, or traveling, or mad, everyone still showed up. It was sacred to them. Some desperate performance of unity. I waited until 7:12 p.m., just after they'd have sat down at the table. Then I hit send. I imagined Mom's phone buzzing beside the centerpiece. Dad reaching for his glasses. Natalie blinking down at the subject line. "The truth you never told me." The delivery read, "Opened in under 2 minutes." That's when the real silence began. I expected chaos. A flood of texts. More voicemails. Some teary apology or half-baked excuse. But instead, nothing. Total silence for 2 full days. That was somehow worse. Then, Tuesday evening, the doorbell rang. It was Dad. He wasn't angry. He didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, holding a folder of his own, lips pressed together like they were stitched shut. "Is this why you did it?" he asked, barely above a whisper. I stepped aside and let him in. He sat at the kitchen table like he'd done 100 times before, except this time, he looked small. Not defeated, but rattled. He placed the folder in front of me. "Everything you found. You weren't supposed to," he said. But I guess it was only a matter of time. I didn't speak. I let him talk. And he did. Slowly. He told me about the affair. About how Mom had gotten pregnant during a time they were on a break, whatever that meant. How she came back a few months later, said she wanted to work things out. How he agreed, on one condition, that the baby would be his, legally and emotionally. He admitted that he loved her, Natalie, that she was his, even if not by blood. And I believed him. But what I didn't expect, what nearly made me drop my fork this time, was what he said next. "You were the only thing I was ever sure about," he said. I blinked. "What?" He looked up at me with this tired, glassy expression. "I didn't push you away because I didn't love you. I pushed you away because I was ashamed of myself, for resenting the wrong child, for pretending so well. I forgot it was pretend." He ran a hand through his graying hair. "I thought if I gave Natalie everything, it would erase what I felt, what I knew. But it just made the distance between you and me wider. And I didn't know how to cross it. I wanted to say something, but I couldn't. My chest was tight, my hands cold. I thought I'd feel satisfied, vindicated. Instead, all I felt was exhausted." He pushed the folder toward me. Inside were letters he'd written over the years, to me. Unsent. Birthday cards he never gave. Notes. Journal entries. I scanned the top one, dated my 18th birthday. A line stood out. "I'm proud of him. Even if I can't say it out loud, I am." And then the final thing he said before standing. "I don't expect you to forgive us, but I wanted you to know. I always saw you, even when I didn't act like it." He walked to the door, paused, and turned. "When you're ready," he said. "We're here." Then he left, and I just sat there. The truth was out, but the storm had only just begun, because Mom hadn't said a word yet. And Natalie? She had just sent me a message, 4 words. "We need to talk." My thumb hovered over the reply button, because the thing is, there's something else she doesn't know. And this time, she's the one who isn't ready for what I'm about to say. I didn't reply to Natalie's message right away. I read it a few times, let it simmer on my screen like a pot left too long on the stove, waiting to boil over. "We need to talk." That could mean anything. An apology, an explanation, a plea. But the one thing it didn't say, and the one thing I noticed instantly, was "I'm sorry." Because Natalie never apologized. Not when she got the bigger bedroom, even though I was older. Not when she told everyone I was moody, just because I didn't want to be around people who treated me like I was invisible. Not when she went to Mom behind my back and convinced her to cancel the car loan I needed to move out after college. Not even when she once told Brandon, loud enough for me to hear, "Luca's just the family's charity project." She was always kind in front of guests, always gracious in public, always the perfect daughter. But behind closed doors, she wielded her place in the family like a sword. Quiet, sharp, and always pressed just beneath the surface of my skin. So when I finally texted back, "Tomorrow, my place, noon," I did it not for her, or even for closure. I did it because I was ready to stop letting everyone else write my story. She showed up exactly on time. Of course she did. Hair done, blazer crisp, not a speck out of place. Like this was a business meeting and not the unraveling of a lifetime of buried lies. She didn't bring Brandon, probably smart, but she did bring that same overly controlled smile she'd worn at the dinner table just before I shattered the illusion. I opened the door, stepped aside, and let her in. She didn't sit, just looked around like she was cataloging my living room, noting the lack of family photos, the silence. "You've done well," she said finally. "It's nice here. I didn't invite you to compliment my couch," I said. Her smile twitched, just slightly. "Right." There was a beat of silence before she spoke again. Softer this time. "I just wanted to say I'm confused and hurt, and I want to understand why you'd bring that up. There. Like that. That made me laugh. Dry, quiet, bitter. Why I brought it up." She blinked, caught off guard. I gestured to the couch, but she stayed standing. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true," I continued. "I didn't lie. I didn't even accuse. I just said one sentence. One sentence, and suddenly everyone stops breathing." She crossed her arms, more defensive than she probably realized. "You blindsided us, Luca." "No," I said, standing up, meeting her at eye level. "You all blindsided me for 27 years. I just returned the favor." She didn't respond to that. She looked toward the window, blinking hard. Maybe she thought tears would sway me. Maybe they weren't even real. "I didn't know," she said finally, voice small. "Not until you said it." I had no idea. I watched her carefully. There was something off. The tone, the wording, like she was choosing her sentences too precisely. So what do you want from me? I asked. Forgiveness? Understanding? An apology for shattering your image of the family that treated you like a queen while I was the court jester? I want to fix this, she said quickly. Too quickly. I tilted my head. Why now? She hesitated. And there it was. That flicker. Guilt? No. Fear. I saw the email, she said. All of it. Mom showed me. That didn't surprise me. But that's not why I'm here, she added, and suddenly her voice lowered, her confidence slipping just a notch. There's something else. I raised an eyebrow. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small envelope. Plain. No name on it. I found this in Mom's closet the night after the dinner. I wasn't looking for it. I was just, I don't know, trying to make sense of everything. She held it out, and I took it. Inside was a single piece of paper. Typed. No signature. No letterhead. But what it said stopped me cold. It was a bank transfer. From a private account I didn't recognize. The date, 10 years ago. The amount, $40,000. The recipient, Gregory Mitchell. My stomach dropped. I thought he signed away parental rights, I said slowly. That's what they told us, she whispered. But this looks like hush money. Or something else. I looked at her. You think he blackmailed them? I don't know. But there's more. On the back. I flipped the paper. There, in faint blue ink, scribbled by hand. If he ever finds out, tell him it was just a donation for college. That's what you agreed on. We can't have him thinking she's not his real sister. I read it 3 times. Then I looked up at her. Natalie's face was pale now. All the composure drained. Luca, she said, her voice almost shaking. What if I'm not their kid either? And just like that, the floor vanished beneath both of us. Because if what we were holding was real, if it meant what we thought it meant, then everything we knew about who we thought we were, was a lie. But I hadn't told her what I found last. Not yet. Because tucked inside Dad's file, behind all the DNA documents and letters and forms, was a second test. One with my name on it. And a note. Handwritten. From Mom. One I hadn't dared open. Not yet. But now I might have to. Because the truth? It might be bigger than either of us ever imagined. And if that note says what I think it might, then neither of us belongs at that dinner table. Or in that family at all. Natalie sat frozen on the edge of my couch, the letter between us like a live wire. Her hands were trembling now, not from fear, not entirely, but from the weight of a question she hadn't been ready to ask until that moment. What if neither of us belonged to them? And I couldn't lie. That same question had haunted me since the moment I found that second DNA test tucked at the bottom of the folder behind the papers about Natalie. Like they'd wanted to hide it from themselves just as much as from me. I stood, walked to my office, and opened the locked drawer where I'd kept it. The envelope was still there, heavy, untouched, sealed in a way that dared me to tear it open and never sleep the same again. I brought it back, sat across from her, and held it in my hands. This is mine, I said quietly. Or it could be. She looked up, startled. What? There was another test. With my name on it. It's from Mom. I haven't opened it yet. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I stared at the envelope. I didn't want to know, I admitted. After everything, I wasn't sure if finding out would destroy what little I still had. But you already said, she started. I said what I found about you. I cut in gently. But I never told anyone about this. She swallowed hard, and for once, she didn't try to make it about her. She just whispered, "Do you want to open it now?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My hands were already moving. I peeled the flap open carefully. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No lab logo. No official stamp. Just a short, handwritten note. In Mom's looping cursive I'd know anywhere. Luca, if you ever find this, I hope you understand. I wasn't going to tell you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I was afraid you'd stop loving me. You are not your father's biological son. There was a time before him. A mistake, maybe, or a choice I never truly made peace with. I never told him. I let him believe. You were born into chaos, but you were never unwanted. Never unloved. You were my anchor. I know that doesn't make up for the years you felt like an outsider. I see that now. And I'm sorry I wasn't brave enough to tell you sooner. You deserve the truth. Mom. I read it once. Then again. The words blurred by the third time. Natalie sat in stunned silence, her mouth slightly open. So, neither of us are his. I nodded. Looks that way. Her voice cracked. And they never told us. Not even once. I folded the letter slowly. They built a lie so big it collapsed in on itself. She exhaled, long and quiet. So what now? It was a fair question. Because if we weren't really their children, not by blood, and no longer by loyalty, what did that make us? Two kids raised in the same house, both fed a story carefully edited and revised for decades, both twisted into roles we never asked for. She was the pride. I was the mistake. And both of us were manufactured illusions held together by fear and family guilt. I stood and walked toward the window, looking out at the street below. A couple walked by, hand in hand, laughing about something small and beautiful. I envied that kind of simplicity, that kind of honesty. I'm not going back, I said at last. To the house? She asked. To them. She stood slowly, her voice more measured now. Luca, I know I wasn't a good sister. I know I let them shape how I treated you. But if I'd known. You did know, I said, turning to face her. Maybe not the DNA stuff. But you knew how they treated me. You just never asked why. You enjoyed being on the throne. She flinched. I'm not saying that to hurt you, I added. But you need to understand, this isn't just about some lab test or some letter. It's about 27 years of being told I was less. Of sitting in silence while everyone else got the spotlight. Of being laughed at on my birthday, like I was lucky to be included at all. She blinked rapidly, nodding. You're right. I did. I let it happen. There was a long pause before she spoke again. But what if we start over? Just us. I raised an eyebrow. Start over how? Without them. Without their rules. Without pretending. Maybe we don't know what we are to each other anymore. But maybe we don't need them to decide it for us. I didn't answer right away. Because in that moment, I realized something. She wanted redemption. A new chapter. A rewritten script. And part of me wanted that too. But not until I had closure. Real closure. The next day, I drove back to the family house. I didn't knock. I still had a key. Mom was in the kitchen, sipping tea, staring out the window like she'd been expecting this moment for days. She didn't look surprised to see me. Just tired. Luca, don't. She lowered her mug. I read the letter. I said, holding it up. I know the truth. Both versions of it. Her lips trembled, but I didn't let her speak. I don't need a story. I don't need justifications. What I need is for you to sit there, look me in the eye, and admit it. She stared at me for a long time, then nodded. You're not your father's son. I nodded slowly. And Natalie? She hesitated. Then, Gregory. I sat down across from her. You had two children with two different men. And instead of being honest with either of us, you decided to craft a fantasy. One where you were the brave mother, the fixer, the one who held the family together. But you didn't hold us together. You held us hostage. Tears filled her eyes. I loved you both, she whispered. But you didn't trust us, I said. You didn't think we could love you back if we knew the truth. She said nothing. I stood. You don't get to ask for forgiveness. Not yet. But you will live with the truth now. I handed her 2 copies of the DNA test. One for her. One for Dad. I'm done hiding your secrets. She sobbed quietly as I walked out. I never looked back. That was 3 months ago. Since then, a lot has changed. Natalie and I talk now. Not like siblings, not exactly. But like 2 people rebuilding something fragile from the ashes. She cut ties with Mom and Dad too, though I know part of her still aches for their approval. I don't blame her. That kind of conditioning runs deep. As for me, I moved. A new apartment. A new job. A new city. It's not about escaping the past. It's about no longer living in its shadow. Sometimes people ask me about my family, and I smile and say, complicated. But in my heart, I've made peace with this. Blood doesn't make a home. Truth does. And after 27 years of silence, I finally said mine out loud.